she started out, okay, Laura Susan Thomas, a digital arts professor, started out earning a BFA in fine arts and illustration and worked for many years as an illustrator and a designer for Walt Disney Imagineering on such projects as Euro Disney, Disney's Animal Kingdom, and Tokyo Disney Seas, which I want to know about. She's worked on several children's books and illustrated for the LA Times Kids Reading Room and Baby Bug magazine. She's also worked on illustrated projects, and now I don't know, are you currently at Allen Hancock College, or is that a previous thing?
Yeah, I teach it.
She's also the gallery director at the Anne Foxworthy Gallery. She loves to play with color and embrace the kid in herself, and loves to experiment with colors. She's also worked traditionally and then also as digitally as well, and sometimes can combine them. And she's a member of the Digital Arts Group in San Luis Obispo and a longtime member of the SCBWI Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, we all know. And she is the IC, the illustrator coordinator for the CenCal region. Take it away, Laura.
Hey, welcome, and thank you again for the introduction. I don't know if anyone here was in the Procreate class, but hopefully I didn't stuff anyone's brain with too much tech stuff. But so we're gonna play today in Photoshop, and I'm gonna do a little quick review of the workspace for those of you that might be beginners, and then try and hit on some things that might like bounce into the more intermediate level. So have your Photoshop open, because what I'm going to do is do a little bit of demo and then give you guys like 10 minutes or so to play like in what we just went over. Because I think more than 20, 25 minutes of Photoshop tech is a lot to like, you know, soak into your head all at once. So, and the idea today is just to play and, you know, there's no proposed outcome of what's going to come out of the art bin class. It's just, you know, be that kid in the limo. I always like to say, go in and press all the buttons and play. So be kind to yourself today if you're just starting out. It's a pretty technical program. And I was going to say, we teach the whole semester in this just for beginning, you know, digital art. So there's so much to Photoshop and Procreate. When we just talked, there's so many levels. It's so deep a program, but even just knowing how to use brushes and mixing brushes and something about layers can get you there. So don't get intimidated by the interface. But it's a really great program. And I always like to say too, as we talk, and we'll talk a little bit about this today, bring in your strengths. Like if you're a great traditional artist, bring in your line work, bring in your textures, even your watercolor. We were just talking, like bring in a piece and use that as your base. You know, use photographs, references. There's so many textures, so many great ways to bring things into Photoshop. You don't have to just begin on a blank slate and paint. So we'll talk about that today too. So I was trying to figure out like 3 hours, how do we fit, what do we fit in? Because there's so much, like I said, a whole semester's worth of stuff I can throw into the box. So I'm just gonna throw in some tools and how I use them, talk about how like my painting creative flow works well, things that help my creative flow so I'm not bogged down in the tech side of Photoshop, and just some tips and little things that I found along the way or learned from other people, because I feel like as artists, we share. That's the great thing about a community of artists, we share information, we share things we've learned. So, so today's about sharing and, you know, playing. If you have questions, definitely put them in the chat. I always tell my students too at school, I'm like, if I'm not making sense, let me know, because you know sometimes I don't. So so we'll get started a little bit. I don't know what everyone's working on. It'd be kind of interesting to put in the chat. I'll have to pull up my chat here. Whether people are working on Cintiqs or Wacoms today with their Photoshop. I'm still using my old Wacom, but I have a really big one here. This guy, mostly because I have a large monitor that's all beautiful art monitor that I can use. And I like the ability to carry mine around without having to have power. So I work in cars and parks and stuff. So, but the Cintiqs are really beautiful too. So I don't know, oh, Microsurface Pro. Yeah, anything with that thing. Oh yeah, and iPads with the sidecar. You can use those as little baby Cintiqs as well. So, so I'm not going to talk too much about the tech on that side, but mostly in the painting side. So let me get started. And I'm always a little nervous in the beginning. Just I'll slow down so I'm not talking too fast. So hopefully everybody got the file that I sent. If not, you can work along with as well. I just want to make sure everyone can see. Can everyone see the file here? If I'm zooming in and out.
Yes, it's showing.
Yay. It's much easier to share Photoshop than it is to share an iPad. So hopefully this will go very smoothly. The only thing that doesn't show up when you share on Zoom is the very top menu bar. So you'll see at the top, and I don't know if you guys can see my cursor. Do you see a green circle there?
We did. It stops just above the little docking buttons. So
yeah.
Looks like
so I took a screenshot of what is above there, because when you share in Zoom, it doesn't share that top menu bar. So what's above there is this menu bar in Photoshop, which I'll be using. That way you can just see what I'm talking about. You can see the file there, just in case we need to refer to that. So what I wanted to start with is we were just talking about Procreate in our last session, and Procreate has such beautiful painting tools with the brush and the smudge tool. I don't know if anyone else likes to work in Procreate and use that smudge tool. And it's a little different in Photoshop. The smudge tool in Photoshop is a little different, and we're going to talk about that. But also introduce mixing brushes. I don't know, as maybe in the chat, does anyone here use mixing brushes often? You know, the first time I used a mixing brush, I was like, I hate these. And then I loved them. So, so we'll talk a little bit about mixing brushes. I had a love-hate relationship in the beginning, but now I just love mixing brushes. So if you have I'm going to pop myself out of the way here. Move a couple windows around. If you have the file that I sent, there's a little exploration folder here. And down below that is one, playing with brushes. So we're going to go ahead and turn that on by clicking in this eyeball column. We're going to click that eyeball on and open that folder by toggling. And there's a blank layer in there where we're going to play with some brushes. So go ahead and we're going to choose that by clicking on it. You'll see my layer, it has a little shade of gray on there, which tells us we're in that layer itself. If you're just starting out and you don't have your layers window open, your workspace may look a little different than mine. If you can't find layers, you can go up to window at the very top, and all the windows I'll be looking at are in here, and there's layers right there. So if you don't see your layers, you can pop that up there. So I wanted to sort of talk about the difference between brushes and mixing brushes. Obviously, brushes are pretty straightforward. Over on the right, I have my toolbar set up with all my tools for Photoshop here. And like I say, when we open Procreate, everything's set in a certain spot. Mine's off to the side. You should see yours somewhere popped up here. If not, again, go up to that window and you can download your tools down in here. So, so I wanted to talk about brushes first. So if we scroll down to where that brush icon is, you'll see right now it has a little eyedropper, little drop of water next to it. That's actually a mixing brush. We're going to click on there and notice we get a pop-up. So under a lot of these tools, let's click on a few of these. There are a lot of other tools hidden underneath that we can access. So if we click on that brush, we're going to see several things pop up. And we're going to start with the brush tool. So we notice that little drop of water went away. That's telling us we're just working in a regular brush. And you'll see up at the very top of our screen, this is sort of a bar where it lets us know what your tool can do. We can change opacity, we can change the flow, which is how much digital paint is going down quickly onto the canvas. There's a few things over here we'll talk about in a little bit. And over here And the left is where you can choose a particular brush to work in. I'm just going to use a regular chalk brush, or you can use just a round, soft round brush for this one. Just use the soft round since everyone probably has that one. And if you choose that, you notice it gives you some sizes here that you can use. You can size it up and down. Hardness, I don't usually mess with that much. Now, you can keep coming up here to adjust things. And this is one of those things that I think streamlines my workspace is depending on what device you're on, there's shortcuts to make your brush bigger and smaller. But the keyboard shortcut is the bracket keys next to you see the letters O and P on your keyboard. Those bracket keys let me get bigger and smaller really quickly. So if I hit the bracket key up, you can see my brush growing. If I hit the bracket key this direction, my brush gets smaller. So I tend to be working with one hand, like doing all these little shortcuts, and one hand painting, just because it helps my creative flow. I don't have to like run across the room to get a new brush, right? Like, or change the size, as I go up to those corners. So remember those bracket keys, you can play with size. Let's grab a color. So my color palette's over here. Yours might be appearing in your layers. So just look for that color. Again, if it's not there, you can go up to window at the very top and you can grab that color palette right here. So as long as we have color and layers open, we should be good to play on this one. So I'm going to grab, let's start with maybe I'm using kind of some bright garish colors just so we can sort of see what's happening. And right now, I'm going to bump this up so it's 100%. That means essentially for traditional artists among us that it's like you've scooped into your palette, you've picked up pure paint without any medium in it whatsoever. It's not being thinned. It's going down quickly. There's a lot of paint on your brush, so you're going to get something pretty solid, right?
Laura Susan?
Yeah.
One person is getting an error message, could not use brush tool because the pixels in a group cannot be edited without merging the group. But then Ruth said she just added a new layer.
Yeah, if that's happening, just make a new layer and you can just paint on the fresh layer. And you make a new layer just by going down and clicking at the base of the layers palette or window. There's a little plus sign next to that trash can that will make a new layer for you. Does that help get you going there?
And that means you have to have the folder for the group selected instead of the layer. Yes, I can do that.
Oh, okay. So she had the group. Yeah.
Yeah. And the layer always appears above the one that you have selected previously.
Right. So if I'm here, it would go layer 19 appeared. If you have that group selected, yeah, that layer is just going to appear right above layer 19. So. All right, so we did a full opacity and flow. Now we're going to bump down that opacity to like 39. And obviously you can see it's much lighter, the color that's putting down. So think of that opacity as your medium, like how much thinner or something that you're putting into your paint. It's less opaque, it's a little translucent. We can see through. And that can be an advantage in the regular brushes. It allows us to blend a bit. So if I come over here with a little purple in that less opaque setting of 38%, it allows me to sort of create some new tones, right? If I go over that solid green or even over this color here. So mixing or regular brushes are really great for just straightforward painting. You can play with that opacity and that flow. But we don't always have a really gorgeous like mix of paint like we might want to see like on an alla prima technique or something on oils. So let's go and now use next to that, we're going to try out the mixing brush. So over on our brushes in our tool palette again, we're going to click on that brush and we have our options. I'm going to grab my mixer brush tool. It has the little eyedrop next to it. And I'm going to use Kyle's Real Oils. That should be in if you just have your regular brushes downloaded, that should be in your wet media brushes down here. You should be able to find Kyle Real Oils there. I've got mine sort of tucked into a thing for the demo today. So this is going to act a little differently. And when your brush comes in, it's probably going to look like this. We'll have a new tool settings up here. Looks very different than our brushes, but it can do some really amazing things. When it comes in, it'll come in at 100% load, most of those brushes, and 100% flow, which means it's putting down some serious color really quickly. You can see here, it's pretty solid. So I rarely use the setting it comes in with. I usually bump that way down. So I take the load and bump it down, sometimes in the 40s or 30s, because I don't want to put down as much paint right away. I want to be able to blend and paint a little bit. And I'll bring the flow down as well. The flow is how fast that paint's coming down on the canvas. So now I brought that down a little bit, and you can see there's a little bit of softness to this brush now. I don't know if you guys can see on the edges there. It just feels a little different, right? Has a little bit of texture to it now, rather than this really solid 100%. The nice thing about bringing that flow down too, I'm going to scooch over here, is we can blend a little differently than we could with the regular brush. It just allows us to mix on the page. So if I grab, let's grab an orange. So if I grab an orange, you can see I can come over here and drop that orange in. And as I start to roll over that purple, you can see like a blend starting to happen, right? So it really allows you to control, with the pressure of your pen as well, how much is mixing together here. You can also control that at the top again with those numbers. We can decide if we want it to mix a lot, right? Or if we want it to just mix a little bit, we can bring that mix down really small. So it's going to be a little less of a mix.
Laura Susan,
Mm-hmm.
there, I just want to make sure everybody can catch up. One person says they just show the fox, so I think you need to turn off that folder and just have open. Yeah, check all the folders that Laura Susan has over here, and the little eye on the left, you can make them visible or invisible. Just make sure you only have the exploration folder open.
Yeah, we're just going to turn on playing with brushes right now. So you can turn them on and off by toggling that little eyeball.
Yeah.
There you go.
And Terry, did you find the color wheel? That's, you go to window and then color at the top of the top bar.
Color. It should have a check next to it if it's on. Everyone's Photoshop will open a little differently. If you can't find it, it also might be tucked in. You might also see it tucked in like this. It might be tucked into one of your palettes. I don't know if that.
Oh yeah, a little tab.
Yeah, so you can actually take those tabs and pull them apart as well. Does that, were you able to find that color palette there?
Yeah, I thought Terry found it.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Yeah, and I figured, you know, maybe somebody else was having the same issue, so we should just.
Yeah, always ask.
Everybody's caught up. Has everybody gotten there? I guess so. Or they're too shy to say.
I taught online for about 1.5 years at the college level doing this. And yeah, we did a lot of like talk, like, okay, how's everybody doing? Because I had to sort of imagine what was happening on everyone's screen.
Well, and so, also there's two windows you have to have open to like look what you're doing and then try it yourself.
Yeah, so if you have any, you can't find something, just definitely let Liz know and we can help you get there. So no worries. And I'll give you a few minutes too to try all this out. So let's see. So regular brushes, you can do opacity and flow, but these mixing brushes can be really, really wonderful as far as how we mix. Let's grab a color that's going to really change what we're mixing here. I'm just going to change to the blue and pull in some blue here. You can see how I can, depending on how hard I push down on my brush, because remember we're using that pressure sensitivity, I can pull in color and start to mix that. And that's something you can't do with the regular brushes, which I really love about Photoshop's mixing brushes. Now you may think as you go, your brush is getting kind of muddy, just like it would in traditional art. So there's one last setting I want to talk about today, and that's up here. If you click on this box or this box, these two little, at the very top, you'll see two little brushes there. This first brush will continue to load your blue nice and solid. So wherever you go, that blue is going to load up solid. It doesn't get, it doesn't change. Whoops, I pulled some green over there. If we click that, if we click this brush, it will clean. It comes in with clean and it's going to change over time, right? We'll be able to play with that. One thing you've noticed is as we've started mixing all these brushes to, these colors, we're starting to get a really interesting color palette happen. And we can sample color in Photoshop. You can do that a few different ways. And the one thing about Photoshop is there's like 8 ways to do everything. So the most straightforward way to sample color would be to actually get the color sampling tool, which I'm not sure. Oh, here we go. This little eyedropper tool here. You can run over to your toolbar, grab the eyedropper, and choose a color. So you're going to see up here, you're going to see your color change depending on what we click on with that eyedropper. Right? So you can change the color you're working with. I find it kind of distracting to keep running back over to my toolbar. So I like to be able to sample color as I paint. So while I'm using, I'm going to go back to my mixing brush tool. While I'm using that mixing brush tool, I'm going to sample color with a shortcut that I like to use, and that's with the Option key. So if anytime you're in any brush, if you hit the Option key, you'll get the color picker. And then when you let up on the Option key, it goes away right back to your brush. So you don't have to constantly be going back and forth. So if you're in the middle of frenzy of painting, you don't have to think about grabbing that color picker. It's there the whole time for you to sample. And so what I will do when I'm painting is it allows me to quickly sample color. So let's come down here and start painting with this purple. And if I want to go back up and grab, I can hit that Option key, grab that orange, and I've switched to orange. As I started to create a nice color palette here, I can sample maybe some of these in between luscious little tones that we've created and play with those. So the first thing to do is just sort of get used to that mixing brush. Just play a little bit with it. Play with some of the settings. Change the wetness. Just try playing a little bit. See how it feels. It can take a while to get used to that mixing brush, but it becomes the tool that's really invaluable, I think, when we paint a lot in Photoshop. So that, and then play with that little Option key shortcut to sample colors.
Well, Laura, Susan, I just want to let you know that some of these people are working on Windows machines. So Alt is the key instead of Option. Also, Command is a key. Control is the key instead of Command.
Yeah, so that would be Alt then for this one. Yeah. So give you guys a few minutes to sort of play with those brushes a little bit. And look around. And then we're going to play with the smudging tool. Anybody have questions while we're letting everyone sort of muck around a bit on the mixing brush? And if you have a question, someone else probably has the same question. So feel free to ask.
Don't be shy. Go ahead and unmute and ask if you like.
Okay, I was trying to type.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I just had a question. I just want to make sure I have this right. When you're painting with the mixing brush, you're not sampling multiple colors. You're just putting colors down and then mixing them on the canvas, correct?
Yeah. When I say sampling colors, when I'm painting, when I'm in the act of painting, I do sample a lot of colors because I'm starting to create like in between, like mid-tones and things that I might want to pick up and use. That's why I like to talk about how to sample those colors while you're painting.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, it just allows you to quickly switch the colors that the paint that you're working with.
You might want to talk about workspaces too, because I know at least Terry has, her menu is looking different than yours. So do you have the standard workspace or did you make a custom one?
I can put it back to the standard one. Let's see, I'll reset to, let's see. Let me reset to essentials. Oop. I don't know why that reset to my essentials. Oh, here we go, reset essentials. Bing. So this may be what everyone had when it opened.
Yes.
That look more familiar? Yeah.
So you can customize your workspace once you like have windows that you like, and you've gone up there to window and chosen the ones that you want to have handy. Then you can, I forget exactly how you do it.
Yeah,
maybe you should explain it.
I'll show you guys. So we're just really going to use layers and colors today. So I'm going to go over to layers and I'm going to click and drag that out. And I'm going to go to colors. Click on that. You can see it got darker. I'm going to drag that out. And I don't really want to see all these. So you see there's like two little teeny tiny triangles up there. I can tuck that away by toggling it out of the way. So I don't have to look at all those menus at once because it can be kind of a little crazy. So yeah, it is a great way to do that. And once you get, so what Liz was talking about is once you get it the way you like it, like a simpler format, what you use, you can go up to window and save your workspace. So let's say this is this workspace I want to keep. I can go down to new workspace and I can save it as SCBWI demo. Okay, oops, bad typist. And save.
And you can redock those little windows that are floating back to the side there if you want, right?
Yep. I can put that back down here. I can drop colors back in there. So, and then you just access them by clicking on them. I'm gonna get rid of some of these, so we don't have to look at them. I'm gonna delete some of these out of our way. And you can also shrink these. If you come down here to the bottom of the color palette, you get the double arrow. It allows you to make that a little smaller so you can see more of what's happening in your layers palette. So has everybody had a chance to sort of play, like feel the difference between a regular brush, mixing brush? See the chats. Yep, okay. So in Procreate, I don't know if there's any Procreators in here. I think there are some. There's that beautiful smudge tool in Procreate, and I think they took the smudge tool and made it amazing. Photoshop does have a smudge tool, but it works a little differently than the smudge tool in Procreate. I don't think it's quite as nice. I think I tend to lean towards those mixing brushes a little more when I'm working. And that smudge tool can be found over on our toolbar here. And it looks like a little finger, basically a finger painting, kind of thing. You'll find it here. If it isn't showing, you might also see a blur or a triangle or a drop that's underneath that little spot there. So let's grab the smudge tool. And again, it has a different set of tool options up here. And you can see we have strength, which is a biggie. And then we're going to talk about, I'm going to take that one off for now. You may not have finger painting. So we're going to come down and I'm going to zoom in so you guys can see. The smudge tool's kind of funky in Photoshop. I find it's usable, but you can smudge. See how it sort of pulls out there? It kind of like pulls it out like it's finger painting. Now that's at 100% strength. If I change that a little bit, let me see here. I'm gonna make this a little smaller so we have more room. I just did a Command T, or that'd be Alt or Control T for those that want a shortcut. So this allows us to, let's grab my smudge tool, pull a little bit, but it's kind of heavy. Like I feel like it's a heavy-handed tool. So I usually bump that again, that strength down a little so I can be a little more specific. and pull softly. You can see how the difference in that smudge is a little softer. So that's just playing with the strength. And then they have this great little thing over here at the very end that says finger painting. And honestly, I think this smudge tool is the best when it's using that finger painting attribute. So I just click once and you'll get a little check mark there. And now we can really softly, it changes the way this smudge tool works. So it becomes very, very soft, right? Very, very soft. So I like the smudge tool, but I think honestly, I end up using the mixing brush more for what I want to do when that comes in.
Is the smudge tool new? I have CS6, so I have old version.
Yeah. It's been around a long time.
Because I don't find it there.
Oh, it's not under yours?
It's not, I have a triangle. Let me see if
Yeah.
it's there.
Should be in
Oh, there it is. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you don't see it on your left-hand bar, you click and hold down the little triangle or the drop, and you'll see 3 different things you can choose.
Yeah.
All
And
those
whatever you
tools
use
have
for that,
options.
what comes in. Yeah. So it's down there. A lot of people think that the smudge tool is going to act the same way it does in Procreate, and it doesn't. It's a little disappointing, but it does smudge. But I think the mixing brush is a better option if you want to blend things together softly. So that was our mixing brush up here. So you can see the difference now with our mixing brush. We can come in and the difference with the mixing brush as well is we are putting down color. Again, that smudge tool doesn't put down color. It just pushes the pixels in a certain direction, right? So I just wanted to do a little intro, especially for those that are not familiar with that mixing brush, how that sort of works. So did everybody get a chance to sort of dabble a little bit with the mixing brush, the regular brush, and the smudge tool? All right. So
You know what? If you want to unmute just briefly, you can hold down the space bar and talk.
Yeah. I'm fine with interaction in here. That helps.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I normally use regular Photoshop, but my machine's now not using it because it's too old. And so I tried getting Photoshop on iPad. And I find it's really terrible because I'm trying to use it right now and I don't have all the toolbars that you have across the top. It's very minimal.
Yeah, the Photoshop has not caught up for the iPad to what it can do on your laptop or your regular computer.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of limited, and but they're going to catch up eventually.
Yeah.
So you might not have all the tools available that we go over today, but you know, this will be recorded too, so you can always go back and sort of.
Yeah, I'll get a new machine before the tapes expire.
That happened to me 2 years ago. I had to buy a new computer because we went teaching online, and all of a sudden I was like, oh, I don't think my.
Okay, sorry to interrupt everybody with that.
Oh, no worries. Yeah.
Don't worry about interrupting. Other people are going to have the same question.
Okay.
Yeah, the iPad version is kind of like a Photoshop Lite, right?
Yeah, it's like Elements or something.
Yes.
Yeah,
it's still, but they don't have a lot of filters and.
And it's expensive, I think.
Was it through your Adobe account? Or?
I tried to get it as through the account, and it's $21 a month or $250 a year, which I think you're not getting anything for that much money. It's really a chip.
Yeah, so I don't know if anyone's a student. You can sign up for $19 for the whole Adobe suite, and that gives you every program that you need. Yeah, so if you have a .org or a .edu account, use it for Photoshop. So
okay, thanks.
yeah, sorry about that. So, all right. So I just wanted to briefly introduce those brushes so we could sort of, oops, sorry, you get my message up there. Go away. So we could sort of play a little bit with those. So as we start using our other, oops, sorry, that's my friend. I don't know why that popped up. So that was just sort of our first little exploration. But now I want to sort of talk about line work, because I'm sure a lot of you guys do. I don't know how many people like to do their inking line and then bring it into Photoshop to utilize, but that's an option. I've never felt like I could ink and draw as well in Photoshop as I do traditionally, so I'll often bring in line work that I've done onto a layer. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about that and how I may utilize that line and maybe some new ways to play with line. So let's turn the playing with brushes folder off. We're going to click that eyeball off. And then underneath there is a number 2 folder. It says character line. So we're going to turn that one on. And so I brought in a inking that I've done, just a little rat fox dude that we can play with. And I wanted to show you guys some differences on how you can use your line work. Most people, if you're worked in Photoshop before, you know, you can bring the line work in on a layer and create give that layer an attribute. So I'm going to go ahead and click on, this is the layer with the line work here. Now I have it locked right now because we don't want to mess with this layer yet. We're going to make a copy of this layer so we can play on the duplicate layer and not mess this one up. And the easiest way to do that is to click on that layer and I just drag it down to that little plus sign and it made a copy for us.
Another great way to do it is Command J.
Yeah, and I like to think of that as just another layer. So, because a lot of the layers that make sense, that one's like Command J. The other way to do it too is you can always come up here to the top of your, all of these windows have these little sandwich lines here. If you click on that, it gives you more options and then you can make a new layer there. So like I said, there's like 8 different ways to do everything in Photoshop. So what we're going to do now is unlock. You notice this layer is locked, and there may be times you want to lock a layer if you're like a line work layer, so then you don't want to end up painting on it by accident. So you can lock a layer by going up here and clicking lock. Now we want to unlock this layer. So I'm going to click on that lock again, and the lock is gone. All right, so I'm going to turn the layer off underneath. So line work you can bring in, and here's some ways we can play with that line work in Photoshop in some different formats. You can just keep that line work on a layer and change the modality of that layer. And if we click up here, it'll say normal, but you'll notice there's a lot of different options here underneath. You see as I sort of cycle through. If you want to use that line work there and paint underneath and have your colors show through, well, a lot of you guys may know this already. This first section here, these darken and allow that layer to become translucent. Everything that's not black will become translucent. So we can see through, but still see the line work. So if I come down to multiply and I make a new layer, so I'm going to click new at the bottom there. I'm going to pull this layer. You can click and drag. We get that little fist that allows you to pull down. I'm going to do some painting in that layer just so you guys can see what's happening. And we'll pick a little orangey red for him. So I am now working underneath my multiply, my line layer with multiply. That allows me to, oops. Oh, it's at 1%. There we go. That allows me to paint right underneath that line work without affecting it. And you can sort of see I'll toggle that line layer off. So that is with multiply. Another way to play with your line is to, you'll see here, let's make another copy of this layer. I'm gonna make a copy. I'm gonna turn off my multiply layer. There's another way to play with line work that reverses it, which is kind of interesting if you want to get like a rubber stamp effect with your line work. And so the multiply layers here, over here we have an option to do divide, which kind of creates a white line or screen. So you can sort of, sometimes I just play with these layer attributes because it can be another way to paint. You can paint with your brushes, you can paint with selection tools, you can also paint with layers in a way. So we can take this line work. So we're going to look at the fox in the middle here for this one. And if we bring this down to screen, you'll see he almost looks like a rubber stamp kind of effect under there. And so all the things that are black are showing up over that color, sort of almost like rubber stamp effect, which can be kind of fun. But you notice we still have the interior of that fox showing as white, so we wouldn't be able to paint underneath. If we want to just make a white line, we can go to divide, and you notice now we have a white line on that fox. And we can play and paint underneath, right? So just a couple of fun ways to play with your line work instead of just bringing it in as black line work. So let me turn that off, and let's bring this back to normal. So I'm going to go back and put this back to normal. Sometimes I like to just play with line work if it's not maybe the final line I like. I just want to use it as a guide. A lot of times if I'm doing portraits or something, I might actually come in with my mixing brush and actually just start painting right on top of the piece itself. And the black line sort of becomes part of that piece, right? I can sort of almost just paint right on top of that line work. And play around a little bit. So I could just use it as a guide to paint. And now if I'm being more painterly, this might be the approach I might take, right? So I can come in and really muck around a little bit here. And I'm using that mixing brush here. So I'm just using the line work really as just a guideline to start painting my character. So maybe you want to get a little more painterly effect in there. And I'm using my eyedropper tool with that shortcut to kind of choose a color. Let's grab a little yellow. So sometimes you just maybe want to use your line work just to paint right on top of as a guide. So a couple options then. We can paint right on top of that line work. We can turn it white into white line if we want using divide. The rubber stamp thing's kind of funky and cool using screen. Or we can switch right to multiply. And we can paint underneath on another layer. So just a couple ways to play with your line work when you bring it in. A couple different options to play with. So I don't know if you guys want to take a few minutes and just play with those attributes in the layers. And Photoshop has these layer attributes set up kind of in an organized way. Everything in this first section is going to darken and create a translucency, so you can see that black line, but you can see through it to paint underneath. But you'll see different effects, like in color burn, that line picks up a little bit of that orange underneath in it, linear burn. When we come down into this section, these are more like screen layers that go on top of, think of like laying a piece of tracing paper down. It's kind of semi-opaque. As we get down into these layers, it's kind of interesting. We can change line color by using overlay, soft light. This section is like sort of like a gel layer almost. So you can see now my black line is picking up all that beautiful orange underneath, and it's actually changing the line color. So a lot of different ways to play with your line and your layers. So any questions on the layers and the attributes up here? All right.
Ruth, go ahead and just unmute and ask.
Thanks. I somehow I lost track of exactly what layer you were on in order to make the mouse look like it was white lines, and then you added, like yellow lines behind it, so it looked like it was yellow lines on a white background. I lost exactly what layer you were working on, and I'm Oh, I see. I can look on your,
Yeah, so I have one layer where I was sort of painting
21.
behind.
okay.
And then if you create a layer on top with our line work here, let's have a couple layers up there.
Yeah,
Yeah, so if you click on that layer, you can come up and at the top it says normal. So right now we're not seeing through the fox because I brought him in with a white background. So that's where we can play.
Yep.
In here, we can see through him and it's like translucent, but we still maintain that line work, which is really great. If you've got beautiful line work, bring it in and use it, then you're actually painting below your line work. And then as we come down to, these are going to create that funky kind of rubber stamp effect because we have white behind him. And if you just want white line, divide basically reverses your line. So it'll change it. And it also picks up a little of the color. But it's kind of fun to play with line rather than just black line work. You might want to, bring in your line work and have a little bit of, I don't know, interest or change in there. So that's
Or Susan, can you also, since we already have these files here, maybe do a quick run through of how to bring in an image?
Oh, sure. Let's see. So if we want to bring in an image like this, let me see. There's a couple ways to do that. One, let's see, what would be the simplest way? So a lot of
Command
people,
O.
what was that?
Command O. Then
Yeah.
duplicate
Command
the
O.
layer in that.
Yeah. You can go Command O is the easiest shortcut. But if you're just starting out under File, these are all your controls to open files, things like that. So I'm going to go to Open.
But it wouldn't be importing it. It would be opening it in a different
Opening. There's a
tab.
yeah. When you import it, you have to do a few other things. Let me see what I've got here. Ooh, let's bring in Parasol. I don't think that's a. Let me go see if I have a sketch we can bring in. No. Bump. And let's see, what do I have in here? Oh, that's an animation. That's not going to work. Let's bring in a JPEG here. Here's an old man JPEG, right? So if we want to bring this file in on a layer, I've chosen that file. I'm going to say open, and he's going to open in a new window. I'm going to unlock his layer, and I can copy that layer by hitting Command C. I have several windows open up here, so I'm going to click back on our exploration, and I can do paste, which can be found under File. Where is paste here?
Wouldn't it be under Edit?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, Edit, paste here, or Command V is the shortcut. And it will bring him in on a layer. It looks like he's very big compared to this file. So I would have to make him a little smaller. So I'll pull him in.
Which is Command T or
T.
or Edit what is it called?
Transform. Yeah,
Transform, yeah.
So if I go to transform, I can grab the ends of his image now, and I can change the size. The way I'm moving things around is I have a shortcut set up on my pen, and I can walk you guys through that at the end of the class on how to set up the shortcuts. Oops, that was the tip of my pen. But the space bar on your computer will give you this little hand. And once you have that, you can move. Oh, I have to say yes to the transformation. I can move him around. I should be able to move him around. Oh no, I'm sorry, that moves me around the space. So if you're zoomed in and you want to move to another space on your canvas, that lets you kind of move around really easily, that little hand tool. Yeah, so that's how you bring in a file. You can also pull that in to your image. Up here, let me go back here. Command 0. This I brought in. You can see this little toggle here, that Photoshop menu at the top. I'm toggling on and off. I pulled that into Photoshop by dragging and dropping. And the only thing that happens though is when you drag and drop an image in, you'll see it has this little gray box over here, which means it isn't a pixelated image. And if you want to work on that in Photoshop, what you have to do is choose that image, that layer, and come over here and go down to convert to layers. So it sees it as a smart object rather than, so it's not editable. So if you do pull in like your line work and you don't do it by opening it into Photoshop, you just drag and drop, you just need to change that to layers in there. So. All right, so line work is kind of fun to play with. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, let's see what our timing is. Where's our time?
We have 2 more hours.
Okay, good. I just had my phone. There it is. So line work and brushes is just sort of a basic overview of how to bring some of that in. You can also create your line work in Photoshop, obviously, as well. So I wanted to talk a little bit about dodge and burn versus brushes as well. So we're going to turn off our little character lines. Make sure you've got that off. And we're going to come down, and that number 4, light and shadow, we're just going to click that on, just the eyeball part. And you should be getting a little frog appearing there. And then above there is group number 5. We're going to turn that on as well. You should get some little green frogs in there. So we've talked about brush tools, and we've talked about mixing brush tools and the differences between those. We talked a little bit about the smudge tool. I kind of want to talk about creating light in Photoshop and shine and glow and that sort of thing, which is really fun tool to play with. And there's a lot of different ways to do that besides just traditionally painting, and some different tools that you can use for that, and reasons why you may want to. So let me zoom in a little bit here, and I'm just going to show you what he looks like normally. Turn that off just so you can see. So you can see here, compared to our frog here, this is the final piece over here. He has a little bit of sheen on his pants in here, a little bit of shine to his pants, a little bit of shine to his face and his arms and things that are happening in there. And there's a big, beautiful, like sort of cinematic light coming in. So we're going to sort of play around with how to create that sort of glowy light in a couple different ways. So let's turn number 5 back on. And if we peek inside number 5's folder, you can toggle it open and closed here in your layers. You'll see there's an experiment layer for you guys. I have it locked, so we don't paint on that one. We're going to make a new layer. Drag that experiment layer down to the plus sign there, or Command J, just another layer. We're going to unlock. That way you'll still have one to play with if we need it. Now, these frogs are on their own layer. Let's see, I'm going to turn that bottom one off. So there's those frogs, and we're going to see if we can create this little shine on his cheeks and the shine that's happening on his nose and his arms. And we're going to do it a couple different ways, because there might be a reason why you might want to, or there might be ways that make more sense to you or you like to work. So I want to talk about a couple different tools to do that. So you'll see there's 2 froggies over here for us to play with, and one is under dodge and burn tools, and the other says brushes with attributes. So we're going to start on this left-hand frog. So I want to make sure we're on the right layer. You can make sure it's grayed out, right? There it is. And we're going to go for the dodge and burn tools. And those again are hidden. Some of them, they might be hidden. So I'll show you this little, you may have a lollipop showing. That's one of our dodge tools. Or what you might see is this little hand like this, or a sponge. So just let me know if everyone can find that little tool section. And the first thing we're going to grab is that dodge tool. There. So what dodge does is it lightens and brightens, but it lightens and brightens in a certain way. I'm going to get my tool a little bigger. Right now I have just a soft round brush, just a really basic soft round, just so everyone has the same one. And over here you'll see like there's an exposure. It's set about 24%. It might have come in at 100. That's going to be pretty bold. So let's zoom this up a little. So I'm going to leave it at 100% exposure, and we can see it's pretty quick that we can create sort of some light on top of this frog and over here. But you can see it's kind of overexposing what's happening here. So let's say I didn't like that. The one beauty of Photoshop, which I'm sure you guys know about, is the undo button, which would be Command C or Control, right, Liz, on a PC?
Yeah, Control Z.
Control Z. So I don't like it. Ugh, I could just hold down that Command or Control key and just keep hitting Z until I'm back where I want it to. So
Sometimes it'll go back and forth.
yeah.
So you might have to hold down Command Option Z to keep it going backwards instead of back and forth. Depends on how it's set up.
Which version you have? Yeah, it may.
Yeah, and you could, but you can change that in your settings.
Yeah,
And you can also set how many undos that you can do.
yeah.
The more you put on there, the more memory it takes.
Actually, Command Shift Z is going to redo. So if you just Command Z, it should undo. Yeah. So
Okay.
yeah, it may depend on they've changed some things in different versions. So depending on where you are.
Yeah, I have an old version.
Yeah, they changed it a couple times. I don't know why they go back and forth on that, but so you can see how you can quickly add a little shine to your frog, right? Now, if we undo that and try coming down a bit, it allows us to build it up. So it's not such a boom, there's light on his nose. If we bring that exposure down, that allows us to sort of slowly bring that up, right? We can build on there. So let's zoom in a little bit here. So instead of that big effect really quickly, I can almost paint very specifically. It gives me a chance to slow down a little, maybe make my brush a little smaller. And I can slowly, I don't know if you guys can see it, how it's slowly building rather than that quick build that we had at 100%, right? So I can get his little cheek shining there and his lips. Maybe and the nice thing about having this exposure down, a lot of times we'll have that reflected light that happens, that little bounce underneath his chin. We can come in and start to slowly get that in there. Right, a little bounce glow under his chin. I'm going to come in on those arms. And the one thing you're noticing about this dodge tool, I don't know if you guys have noticed, it's not going off of the pixels. I'm not painting out in this area. It's only going to affect the pixels that it has to have pixels to work. So for everybody to have a chance to play with that tool. Now, the one thing about the dodge tool is it's a little clunky in that it just will lighten that green to lighter shades of that specific green. And you'll see what I'm talking about in just a sec when we try a brush versus this dodge tool. So take a moment and see if you can grab that dodge tool and sort of shine up that little frog there. Give him a little reflected light. And now I'm just going to toggle him off so you can see how it's changed, how quickly you're able to add some light to this piece. And strangely enough, that dodge tool is based on the actual dodge tool they used to use in dark rooms. It was a stick with a round plastic circular shape on it that you would push. You'd push the film or the film that you were, or the piece you were developing into the developing fluid longer if you wanted it brighter and lighter, right? So they actually use the shape of that tool to make this little icon. So is everybody sort of playing with that one on our dodge and burn froggy there? Getting some light shadow. All right, so let's talk about the burn tool. Let's go back over there. Now burn is going to darken areas. So we can grab that burn tool and we're going to darken. So it doesn't matter, the color does not matter in this case. It's just a tool to dodge to lighten, burn to darken. So if I want to darken some areas on the back side of my frog, I'm going to zoom in so you guys can see. You can see how quickly I can come in and start to darken those areas. And I have 2 layers of frogs just so you guys can see how quickly you can change this little froggy. If I maybe got too bright here, I can come back in and darken a little bit, even the back of his cheek. His little head. And the beauty of these two tools are, oh, right where his hand's going over there. I'm gonna maybe darken that little shadow where this is happening. So very quickly, we can come in, and again, you can adjust how fast this works. I can come in and really sort of create some dramatic lighting effects on my piece. Super quick, right? With these dodge and burn tools. And again, the burn tool is just going to darken. So you're only going to get that green, like over here, it's just going to darken that green to the point, if you just keep going over it, it is going to go almost to black. So it gives a different sort of effect than what we're going to try next. So that's dodge and burn. So great way. And let's toggle him again now so we can see just in a few minutes how fast you can add some value changes to your work, right? So dodge and burn, I love dodge and burn, but sometimes I want to have some color in my shadows. Maybe I don't want that green to just go to dark green. And that you can't do with the dodge and burn tools. You really need to use a brush for that. And so we're going to talk about a couple of other things too. So we're going to go back up to our brushes where we had that brush with the eyedropper. I think mine's on mixing brush right now. I'm going to go over and grab just a regular old brush tool. And I'm going to use the soft round. And if you've been using that, you'll find it, your brushes that you've recently used here. But I'm just going to stick with some basic brushes today, just since everyone has those. Over on opacity and flow, I'm going to change these. So remember, we can change these tools up here. I want to build up my light slowly. So I can adjust it here, but for now I'm going to leave it at 100% just so I can show you what's going to happen. If you remember when we were looking at the line work, we could change different modalities in our layers. You can also do that to a brush, which I think in Photoshop's amazing. You can do it very quickly and easily. Procreate, you can do it, but it involves a little more of actually adjusting brushes. This one you can pop up here, and we see the same modes in our brush. You don't have these in mixing brushes, just regular. So I can come in with a normal brush, and let's pick a light tone. We'll go in here and get a little light tone. I can use a normal brush and paint in, oops, seed, paint in that color. You know, I can use my color sense, but it's kind of clunky and heavy. I'd want to adjust my opacity, right? If I did that, I'm going to bump it way down and slowly build. Oh, I turned off the target layer. I just want to build that up slow like this, right? Maybe. But I can also, I'm going to undo, put a little attribute to this brush. So I'm going to come down into color dodge and linear dodge. And that's going to make things brighter and lighter, but color dodge tends to be like, I feel like color dodge is like, it's like a tool that wants to scream at you. If it's at 100%, it's going to create this effect, right? A little too much. And I'm going to undo that. Oops. I'm going to bring that opacity way down. So whenever I use color dodge, I always bring down the opacity and the flow. It allows, again, for me to slowly build up, maybe a little more than that. I can, again, slowly build it up where I want that highlight to happen. So I can slowly build, but it creates that same effect as the dodge tool. But I can just be a little more painterly about it here. Now the difference here is, let's say I want to create like a blue light down here. With that dodge tool, all it did was lighten the color that was there. If I switch to a blue light, maybe I want a blue light reflecting up on him. Now it's going to actually, let's see if I can get into color dodge here. Here's the cool thing about using the brush as opposed, I don't know if you guys can see the difference happening in there. I can actually tint the lightness that's happening. So there's a difference between just lightening the pixels that are there with the dodge tool and using color dodge with a brush, I can get that blue sort of reflected light. If I wanted like a moonlight reflection on him, I could come in and create that moonlight. And it's going to look a little differently than if you're just using that dodge tool. So there might be a different reason why you would want to use one tool over the other. You see the difference in his cheek there, right? In tone. Now the only problem with the brush is, I don't know if you guys noticed, I'm painting right off my frog and I'm going to have to clean all that up. So I'm going to, just to show you guys what I'm doing, I'm going to make a copy of the frogs. And this time, instead of using the brush right on this layer, I'm going to make a new layer above. I'm going to call this clipping paths. And you can do this in Procreate too. We talked about this today. It's not a clipping path yet. So I'm going to come up to those nice little sandwiches at the top right of my window. And I'm going to click on that. And I can go to create clipping mask here. And I'm going to click that. And you'll notice all of a sudden my layer popped over to the right a little bit. And there's a little line that goes down. This is now connecting this layer with the one below. And what that means is no matter what I do with my brush, it's only going to paint on the pixels below. So it's kind of constraining that. So now, before when we were painting, I was getting a lot of sort of overflow. Now it constrains just to that shape below. So it's constraining to the shape of those pixels below. And it allows me to brush cleanly on this frog. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. My color dodge was a little high. And the next thing I'm going to do is take this clipping path layer, I can hear you, and I'm going to give it an attribute of color dodge. And you can sort of see how light may come in. That might be a little strong, so I can take that and adjust opacity. So there's a lot of different ways to play with how this might work to lighten and brighten. Another great setting for light under your brushes and your layers is linear light. Sort of creates this really nice soft light approach. So it's linear light, it's down in here. And again, I can play with how little or how much that frog is being affected. So I know that's a lot of light and play. So I'll let you guys take a few minutes and play with those, or if you guys have questions on those tools, it's the color dodge versus the color burn versus using a brush to create that lighting effect. I'll let you guys play with that little frog layer for a little bit. Any questions on that? I know it's a...
Hi, do you think you could repeat that moment where you had the clipping mask and then you were adding on the tone of the color and then changing the layer to a dodge color as well, a color dodge as well?
Yes, let me get rid of this one. I'm gonna drop it in the trash. So let's say we wanted to create that clipping mask above so we could paint like crazy and not have to worry about that overflow. So I've got my frogs here. Let's turn them off. So there's my frogs. I want to create that clipping mask layer above there. So I create a new layer. I'm going to go up here to those little sandwich lines at the top of my layers palette, and I'm going to come down to create clipping mask. And there's a shortcut for it too, once you get into using all those shortcuts. And you'll see that layer just pop over, and then you'll see that little line connecting. So now you know this layer is now connected to the pixels on the layer below. So
and
that's
also to clip, it has to have show the layer of the frogs all by itself, because it has to be blank behind it. Otherwise, it'll just clip to the whole.
oh, right. Yeah. So my frogs are on their own layer. They don't have anything around them. The only pixels on this layer are the frogs. If it was on that bottom base layer, it wouldn't really work because the pixels fill the whole page. Yeah.
Or if it was white behind them, and it has to have those little
Yeah.
gray and
Yeah, they have to be sitting
Technical.
alone. Yes, yeah, good point, Liz. Yeah. Yeah, if I put a clipping mask on this base layer, it wouldn't matter. It would just paint everywhere. But yeah, since there is a floating object, let's see, I can float them around a little bit. You can sort of see they sort of stand on their own there, right? So, but it's a great tool once you maybe have a character finished and they're on their own layer and you want to start detailing them or adding fur or hair or texture. It's a really great way to, you know, paint without having to go back and clean up your edges. All right. Oops. Everybody get a chance to play a little bit with the frogs? Some light and shadow. It's a little different feel, the color and the dodge versus painting with a brush. What the advantage I think it has is with the brush is it allows you to create a little bit of color and light rather than just lightening or darkening. So color dodge is lightening, color burn will darken, but they lighten to white or black eventually. Using your brush with a color dodge attribute to it up here allows you, or a linear light, allows you to slowly lighten with color and lighten that area. So it allows you a little bit more finesse, I think, sometimes. But then of course you want to make sure if you're doing something and you need to keep that edge clean, you can always make that clipping path too. So let's talk about that little beam of light. We have this little glowy beam of light behind the frog in the final piece. I think you guys can see if I blow it up a little bit. And it's kind of pushing like that sort of cinematic kind of lighting that's happening on him. And it's sort of translucent. And I just want to show you guys a really easy way to create sort of beams of light or that glowy effect. Now that we're starting to get that, we're going to use a brush for that. So we're going to we'll turn off our green frogs, that number 5, we're going to turn that off. And we're just going to work in this number 4 folder. So I'm going to toggle that open. And you'll see there's a couple layers in here. The first layer has some of the reeds that are in front and the dragonfly, because we want to put that light beam behind. This is why layers are so wonderful in Photoshop. I've got the frog here. He's sitting on his lily pad, little froggy-o. And then I have that base layer here. So we want to create that beam of light between that base layer and the frogs and stuff. So I set up a little moonlight layer for you guys already. So there's a layer that exists to play on. So we're going to go to that moonlight layer. And a really great way to play with creating light, whether it's in the water, like water, you know, that light that cascades into water, or here. And it also talks a little bit about how we can constrain our tools a little bit. So I'm going to use a basic round soft brush here. So we're using the brush without the little dot on it or little drop. Use that basic round brush. I'm going to just keep it in a regular format for now. I'm just normal. I don't want to worry about flow or opacity yet, because this is where we can later help with our layers. So I'm going to bring that up in size. And in this case, we're going to use just white here. You could use a color as well. We'll keep it simple. Now, one of the things in Photoshop is, you know, a beam of light, there's certain things that you need to paint and you want them to be, you know, not wobbly, you know, light beams or lines, whatever that happens to be. And there's a few ways to constrain your brushes in Photoshop. And one of those is to use the Shift key. So on this moonlight layer, we're going to hold down the Shift key, or click once and hold down that Shift key. And you notice it creates, oops, sorry, that should have worked. Oh, sorry, Shift. I was hitting spacebar. Sorry about that. So we're going to hold the Shift key down. Now we're going to make a line, and you'll notice you can do nothing but create a straight line. And it only works up and down. Oops. Click, and we can go up or we can go up, down, or back and forth. And it creates a nice constrained straight line. The other thing we can do is create angled lines by tapping. So instead of clicking and dragging our pen across the screen, I'm going to go tap and lift my pen off the screen. I'm going to hold down the shift key and then tap one more time. So I'll show you how this works. I'm going to tap here. I'm going to lift my pen. I'm holding down the shift key and I'm going to come over here to this read and tap one time, and it connects the dots essentially. So you can kind of practice and you can keep going as long as you want, connecting the dots. So go ahead and do a quick little practice with the constraint. So undo that, and we'll go through them just one more time. These seem basic, but they can be really helpful when you want to create like certain effects. So holding the shift key down and drawing allows you to, create those straight up and downs. And if I tap once, shift, tap again, it sort of creates that sort of connecting rubber band effect. So go ahead and let me just take the few minutes and play with that a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, I just
All right. Is everybody sort of getting that feel down, the difference to make those straight lines and that tapped line?
Yep.
Good. All right. So let's make a light beam. I like to use a lot of light, and I tend to use a lot of cinematic lighting in my work sometimes. So let's make a light beam. And we've got this moonlight all set up for us. The way I got rid of the beams that were there, I just did undo. Remember, Command or Control Z, just got rid of all my practice light beams. So now we're going to create a light beam, and I'm going to go fairly large on this one. And now I'm going to come up and bring this opacity down to maybe, let's keep it up here. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to go tap once. I'm going to hold the shift key down, and I want this beam to go behind my frog. I'm going to tap again. And we have a light beam, right? If I wanted to make a smaller light beam next to it, maybe there's a little extra light coming in, I'm going to tap once. We have a light beam. Now I could keep that solid, or I could bring down the opacity too. Tap, tap, maybe a secondary beam of light, right? Now it's kind of solid, or it doesn't really feel like light right now, but that's where we can utilize our layer attributes. So I'm going to come back over to my moonlight, and it's like, oh, we're actually on linear light. Sorry. So if it was normal. So I'm going to come down to linear light. It's already there. And I'm going to bring that opacity down. I can play with this and decide how strong I want that beam to be. So I can sort of light up the night here. The nice thing about linear light, or if we use that add or color dodge, add's probably a good one, linear dodge, is it allows us to see some of that, what's happening behind that beam itself, right? So it's a really easy way to sort of create light in a piece rather quickly. And I don't know if we want to, does anyone want to see how to drop off a light beam, like kind of pull it back? Because, as light comes through, it sort of dissipates a bit. We maybe don't want that solid line ending over here where it's coming down in the behind the frog.
Yeah.
Okay. I wasn't sure how far up we wanted to go in playing. So we've got that moonlight there, but it feels a little clunky at the end of that beam. It's just like, if you shine a light into a dark space, the deeper it goes into that space, it begins to disappear, right, and dissipate. So I want to create that little nice dissipation of light as it's falling behind my frog. And I want it to be, it's bright back there. So I'm going to use something that I love to use called Edit and Quick Mask Mode. And this is where, again, your painting tools may not be always a paintbrush in Photoshop. It might be a layer. It might be the attribute you put on that layer, how you adjust it. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to go up to select. It's not showing there, but it's this select feature. And we're going to hit select, and I'm going to come down to edit and quick mask mode. And this is a really cool tool. you notice all of a sudden my moonlight went red, that layer. So that lets me know I'm working in quick mask mode. Anything I do in here is not going to be destructive until I say, okay. I want to create a mask to knock out some of that light. I'm going to show you a really clunky version of what this quick mask mode does, and then I'll show you the little finessed version there. If I can paint in this mode, which is really lovely. Let's see here. I think I'm going to come in here and paint, and you'll see red showing in here. And I'm just going to create like a wackadoodle mask just so you can see what this does. Right? Just I'm creating a mask. I'm not actually painting right now. I'm just creating a mask. And so if I come out of quick mask mode, what it does is it creates a selection. So I can actually really finesse a selection. So you can see that selection in there. I'm going to need to inverse that. So I'm going to go to select again and inverse. Where are you? Command Shift I or Control Shift I. And if I hit delete now, you'll see I can really finesse a selection and really pull out. So just so you can see what's happening in there and how that masking works. But what we want to do, I'm just going to undo that. What we want to do is have that light beam fall off as it like slowly gets behind to that darker space. So I'm going to go back into quick mask mode and let's undo all that. Okay. So I want to create just a drop off over here, a masking tool that's going to be soft. I don't want a hard edge. I'm just going to grab over here in our toolbar, we have a gradient tool. If you don't see the gradient tool, what you might see is a paint bucket there as well, because remember there's tools tucked in. So I'm going to go to a gradient tool. I'm just going to go from dark to nothing, and you can choose different gradients here under basics. So if you have some crazy gradient like this that's come up in there, all you have to do is click that little button and you can come back and reset that. So I'm going to just go from dark to nothing. So I'm going to click it as black to nothing. And what I want to do now is create a mask so I can knock it out super soft. So to use the gradient tool, you click and drag. I hope I do this the right direction. I always seem to reverse myself. So I want to knock this out, but I want to knock it out softly. So again, I click and drag that out, and I can decide where that beam is going to slowly disappear, and it should softly disappear. To come out of quick mask mode, I'm just going to go to unclick that. So we're still on our layer. All we've done is create a mask. You can see the selection here. It looks like a hard edge, but it's not going to be. It's going to be soft. And now if I hit the delete button, you can see it just softly eliminates the bottom of that beam. But edit in quick mask mode can be used in a lot of different ways. To deselect, just Control or Command D. So you can see, I'm going to do the undo button so you can see the difference with just that little soft mask. So we're taking that off, and you can see the difference as I delete that beam. So it's a little stronger as it comes in. It's slowly dropping off as it comes through using that edit in quick mask mode. All right, does everybody get their moonbeam in there? So now we can come in if we want to bring some of these little fireflies up, create some light, maybe on his pants. We want a little bit of that beam, that light to shine there. Again, we could use that dodge and burn tool, but we are on a great layer already where we've set it up. We could come in with our brush and just slowly just make sure we have the right color. Here you go. Not sure that's not working for us. Oh, because I'm underneath the frog. So I'm going to come up to, sorry, his glow pants layer. So I have to be above that frog for that to show. And now I've sort of set these up for you guys to play with. There's firefly glows, backlighting, collar glow. So you can grab like the glow pants layer and just sort of play with it. It's already set up as a linear dodge add layer. And I'm just going to come in and, oops, that's pretty strong. I'm going to bump this way down and I can sort of begin to add some of that light, maybe hitting his pants. I can begin to maybe add to his shirt here. And the nice thing is this layer is kind of translucent. So it gives you a little chance to practice with some light on this little froggy guy here. So you can see what a difference lighting can be a really great compositional tool. I'm going to go ahead and click off his pants and his moonlight. You can see it can be quite a different compositional tool to play with light. So we're creating light with attributes like linear dodge or add, color dodge with a brush, or we can use those dodge and burn tools as well. So let's see what time we're at here. Oh, it's already 2:30. Is everybody able to get some light flowing into their piece? Lighting up your frog a bit.
I heard a yes. I mean, I read a yes.
Okay, good. I was trying to find my chat. All right, so let's close up our Frogio here. And I want you guys to have a file so you can just keep playing with this later on. I'm going to, let's see, we're going to 1 to 4, right? So we've got a little more time. So, so I don't know if you guys want to take a little break, like a 10-minute break, since we're about halfway. Does anyone need a break, or do you guys want to?
I could use 5 minutes.
Yeah. All right. So we'll do a little quick break. Give everybody a 5-minute break or so, and you can stretch a little. I don't want to throw too much at you. I mean, there's so much in this program to talk about. I was trying to figure a few things that might make something you could play with, later on. So let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about some of those selection tools and some ways to sort of start a painting and a little bit of digital grisaille and fun stuff like that when we come back.
And a little bit of text. Will we talk about text?
Oh yeah, we can do text too if you guys want to figure out how to get text in to piece.
It's nice to know for like making like your sample art cards and stuff.
Oh my gosh,
like
yeah, dummies or anything like that. Yeah, you could do a full dummy this way. So yeah, we'll do text and stuff too. And if there's things you guys want to know about, like just definitely let us drop it into the chat too. So I mean, like I said, there's so much to pick from to demo. It's sort of like,
Oh, this is a very, very deep program.
Yeah. Yeah,
but you don't have to know it all, which is kind of wonderful.
No, and I'm just sort of throwing things out. Remember, it's going to be recorded too, so you can go back and, as I said before, pause me. So. Okay, so we'll do a little. And I was going to show you guys a trick too on laying out. I found something I picked up a couple of years ago about laying out in grayscale, like quick layouts and stuff for, anyway, if you do a lot of landscapes or things like that in your piece. So we'll play with that too. Let me stop share.
Looking at my clock here.
Yeah. It was funny when I was teaching this online during COVID. It was interesting because we had to imagine what was happening on each other's screens because I couldn't always see, what students were doing or where they needed help with. So
Oh, yeah. And they were totally counting on you not being able to see them, probably.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, there's screens. Well, yeah, a lot of my students didn't do it because, equity issues and stuff too, because, they were Zooming from households with multiple kids going to school and parents working at home. So it was hard for a lot of them to actually share their space.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I was really glad that my kids are all grown up and I did not have to do that.
We had a few mom moment interruptions. That was kind of funny. Only one guy in a towel once, sort of, it was pretty good for the most part, but yeah, it's hard. It was hard for some people to share because there was so much happening in everyone's households, So.
Well, I'm glad we're recording it because
Yeah.
we'll be able to review.
Yeah.
Yes, very true.
So
you can start again whenever you're
okay.
Ready.
We're back. All right.
That was 5 minutes.
All right. So let's jump back over. So in the Procreate class, if you guys were in there, we talked about that sort of color overlay layer where we could create like a grayscale or just really perfect the painting underneath, and then use another layer to create color. So I just wanted to show you guys how that works in Photoshop and where that is as well, because it can be a really great tool depending on what you're doing. And some of the stuff I'm showing you guys is maybe a little more painterly. Hopefully you can, translate it over to whatever you're doing stylistically. So this was a piece I had done with some light issue, effects and I've got this portrait in here. So I wanted to show you guys what she looks like here, but I also wanted to show you guys what she looked like in process as well, because it's always interesting, I think, to see process. And when I start a piece like this, let's see if we can turn her off there. I usually have a reference off to the side, and I'm just doing like a seeking, sketch, rough sketch in Photoshop. But in this case, I was trying to keep her head tipped up. So I wasn't really concerned about what this was going to look like. It was more just like a study on how that tilt was working. And I wanted to, just throw it in there. And then I created a layer on top of that to start painting her in. And you can see, and this is just my sort of work pattern. I started really just creating almost carving in the shapes, thinking of contour lines, like her neck. A lot of the strokes in her neck were going down and up and across, depending on the surfaces. But I work pretty rough and loose in the beginning. And then what I'll do is I will take that layer, and this is the beauty of digital, and I'm sort of walking you through a quick process, but I would take that layer and duplicate it. So I've got this rough layer I might want to come back to. I would duplicate that layer, and then I would maybe work with my mixing brush at this point, just so you can sort of see how I might take something through. I might take that mixing brush and then start figuring out maybe some areas of color and start finessing things as I go, right? I want to get that color on the tips of her cheeks here. So I tend to use, what I also love about digital, and it's more of a functional element, is that I can take a layer, work on it. If I want to keep it to come back to, I can come back to it. But I can duplicate this layer as many times as I want in process. I don't know if that makes sense, right? So if I want to create a little light on her shoulders here, and just, I can experiment and experiment to my heart's content, whereas that's something I can't always do on a painting. Or if you think if you're a traditional oil painter, you have that ability to have that underpainting, right, happening. So I can sort of create that as I go slowly. So I might just keep duplicating my layers as I work, as I go, and just keep building, right? And I've started to suss out the form. At this point, I don't need that line on anymore. I might duplicate this layer. Just, it's like you can always go backwards. Whenever you're doing something dangerous to an oil painting or traditional painting, it's scary because you can't always go back, especially like watercolor or something like that. But in digital, you can make as many layers as you want. You can keep working, you can keep playing as you go and keep perfecting. So this layer, then I duplicated and finessed it a little bit more, right, on each layer. And you'll notice this layer actually sort of changes a bit. And then you get to the point eventually where you've finessed it. So the one thing I love about traditionally or working digitally is don't be afraid to like just duplicate a layer to try something out, duplicate a layer to work on it. You can always delete those old layers later on. I kept them in here because I do a demo, it's a much longer demo for my class. But eventually I ended up with, you know, my piece here. It's a little more finessed. You can see I've started dropping in eyes and details in this layer here. So digital also allows us to explore a little bit, to try dangerous things with our work, right?
Laura Susan, I would interject here to say that save your file as you go along.
Yes, yes. You can actually set it up to autosave too, I think. But yeah, save it in several places. Save it to the cloud, save it to your computer. So you have 2 backups, because I don't know about you, Lizzie, I've had files corrupt themselves. Who knows why? They won't open.
Or you fill up your RAM and then it crashes.
Yeah, you get the spinning wheel of death and it's all over. If you ever do get the spinning wheel of death, my backup plan for spinning wheel of death, if I haven't saved or I've forgotten, I gotten in a frenzy, is to do a quick screenshot and use that as my base. So if you're ever getting a
brilliant idea.
Yeah, I know. I was like, oh my God, there's like 8 hours and 20 layers worth of work. And I thought, wait, I could screenshot it at least. It's 72 pixels print, but at least I have a base of where I was. So if
now,
that ever happens.
Does everyone know how to do a screenshot? At least on Mac. I don't know how to do it on a PC, but on a Mac, it's Command Shift 3 for the whole screen, or 4 if you want to select.
Yeah. If you ever get the spinning wheel of death and you go, oh my God, I did not save today. Yeah, screenshot that thing. So you can at least have something to start from. But yeah, Liz is right. Save often and save multiple places. So we're finessing this lady here. And I was looking at her in this piece, and that's why I like to use this as a demo for the next little fun tool. It may seem like selection tools and stuff are kind of boring, but man, they can be really great. And we talked a little bit in Procreate about warp. And this is a great example in Photoshop. Her lips and her nose is, I feel like it's kind of drifting off a little bit this way. So I want to maybe play with this piece. So I'm going to make a copy of it before I do something drastic to it. So either Command Control J or drop it down to that little plus sign there. So I've got a copy. I can do what I want to this now. There's a couple of things we can do. We can warp this under Edit at the top. You'll find some transform tools down here. So we have transform, and transform is basically just scaling it up and down, but there's a couple options under transform like warp. So I'm going to go to warp, show you what that does. Warp is great. Let's say my head was a little askew and I don't want to repaint this whole thing. I can, so I can zoom in a little bit. I can pull, and then you'll see there's these great little handles. I could change just tiny little minute changes. I don't know if you guys can see that happening on there. See if I can zoom in a little.
Yeah, yeah.
Tiny minute changes where, especially if you're doing people or faces, where you're like, when things are off anatomically, it kind of gets us sometimes. So this allows you to kind of play with minute changes in your, so this is warp, and you have these little handles to play with. You can also grab inside of there anywhere too and change the shape of something. So you can really see how handy that would be. If you've painted this face and it just feels like it's a little like askew, you can adjust with that. And that's under Edit, Transform, underneath all the normal scale type of things down here under Warp. There's another tool that's really great. Let's say it's not the whole face or object that you want to create. And then once you do transformation and you're satisfied with it, if you're wondering why you can't keep painting, like what's going on, you just have to hit this check button, say, oh, I like that, check. And now you can keep working. Let's see. Oh, let's do the bubble up there. I'm going to make a duplicate of this again because I want to show you one more warp tool or transformation tool that can be really great if you want to just transform a small area. So we're going to actually turn her mouth into a smile here just for this one. And these are just good tools to know about. So we're on this tool. I don't want to warp her whole face. So I'm going to use a selection tool, and up here at the very top of your toolbar are these selection tools. You'll see a little lasso. There's a square. If you click on that, there's, you know, circles, things like that you can also use. But I'm going to use the lasso tool, which is similar to the freehand version of selection in Procreate. And there you go, the Learn More tool. And I'm going to feather this. It should come in at 0. I tend to keep mine feathered. So I'm going to create a soft edged selection because I just want to affect just that mouth, right? So I'm going to create a soft edge selection. So I'm going to give it a little bit of a feather, maybe like 20 pixels. I'm going to grab that lasso tool and I'm just going to come in and just grab that mouth area. I just kind of want to just change the mouth. And now we're just changing a mouth, but you can see how this might work for other objects or tools if you need to do that. We're going to go back up to edit now that we have a selection, and we're going to go to this puppet warp, which sounds kind of funky. And we're going to get this crazy mesh that appears. And it may look a little nutty, but what we're going to do is this allows us to really minutely move and change things. And it works sort of on a rubber bandy kind of factor. Now you'll notice my cursor's turned into a little push pin. So I'm going to drop a pin there and you'll see a little blue dot come up. Now this won't work unless we have something to really push it against. So I'm going to create several of these at the top and bottom, maybe some key points along my mouth. So I can push and stretch and pull. You'll see in a sec how this is going to work. You could put these anywhere in here. Just going to focus on playing with that mouth. I mean, this is a little more advanced, like if you're really fine tuning a piece. All right, so I've got several in there that we can play with. So now once I click on these dots, I can push and pull very carefully this mouth the way I want to maybe play with it. If I need to add more dots, I can. But it allows, oops, thank you. If it doesn't hit a pin, sometimes it gets picky. But it allows me to kind of play with this, just this little area of the piece that I'm working on. Right? So I'm going to say okay by hitting my little checkbox up here and deselect, Command D. But because I created a soft edged selection, I don't see like a hard edge where I've created that change. And let me show you the difference here. We've gone from this mouth to this mouth. I don't know, can you guys see that change that happened there?
Yes.
Yeah, it's very subtle, but sometimes it looks right except for one little eyelid that needs to lift up, right? Or something like that. And maybe you don't want to paint it. You just want to go quickly in there and, you know, adjust that. So sometimes these little transformation tools under here can be really handy. So we played with, I played with warp, and that was the one with the handles. And then this puppet warp is a little more specific to like certain little areas that you can play with. So I like using those, especially if you're doing like portrait work, where there's the whole shebang. So those can be found under edit to sort of play. So let's turn her back on. And let's turn these guys off. So, you know, my final piece had this, you know, I have all the detail underneath and I have the color in there. So I wanted to show you how I dropped that color in. So I'm going to turn her off and we're going to turn back on the final piece here. There she is. So I think I worked on that one. On top of there, I'm going to show you there's a color overlay layer that I have, and I'll show you how that works in just a second, but you can see how this color is laying down right over the painting underneath, and all the details of that painting are coming through. And that's because this has an overlay attribute to it. So sometimes if you're painting something in and you want to add color, but you don't want to actually add it to the painting, you already have that base painting, creating that overlay layer can really create a beautiful way for you to add color to your piece that you can change, right? There it is. There she's finished, and I have her finessed, and I want to bring in some color. I can drop in that overlay layer. Now that's where I'm painting. So I'll sort of show you how that overlay layer works. That's the finished one. I'm going to go ahead and hit a new layer. Overlay color. These are just ways that we can work in Photoshop that aren't damaging. We can go backwards. We can change our mind on things. So I have this overlay color. I'm going to come up, and I'm not going to leave it on normal, because if I leave it on normal, what I will get, let's grab a brush here. I'm going to get a chalk brush for this. What I'm going to get is, very solid shape on here on top, right? You're not going to see through that. But if I have it on an overlay layer, we get to see through that color. It's like a translucent gel that's gone down on there. And we sort of looked at this in our Procreate as well. So I can come in and create color all I want in this layer. If I want to create some shadow, maybe some dramatic shadow over here, I can come in with my blue, right? And it's pretty solid right now. Of course, it's kind of a neat effect. I can change the opacity of my brush, right? And just softly start figuring out that color in there.
That's a really great way to control your values.
Absolutely. You can work all your values out ahead of time. Now, this may not work for everybody, but it's, depending on what your style is for especially children's, but I think it's kind of a nice way to play. I can lighten up here, I can lighten up those cheeks. It can be a great way to study, to do a color study if you're not too sure what you want to do yet. And you maybe have a rough version of your work and you just want to do a color study on top, figure out what your color palette's going to be.
I think that's a technique that the old masters used to use. Isn't that called grisaille?
It is, grisaille.
Yeah.
I made it my mission. Like, I love these techniques. So how can I redo this in Photoshop? So you can really play. Oh, we can add that little pink to the nose here, right? So you can really play with your color without feeling like you're going to damage anything. I could absolutely paint on this layer or duplicate it and begin working color on that layer, but I have it the way I want it, so I can, utilize that tool. Yeah, it's an old master's technique for sure. Yeah. Oops. There, I wasn't right on that layer. Let me go back to my overlay layer. So then I want to talk about something too that even whether you're doing something very graphic style or maybe more, painterly like this, the other beauty of Photoshop is the ability to make quick changes and adjustments without affecting our painting. Something we can't do if we're doing a watercolor and we go, I kind of wish it was a little warmer, the colors, right? How do I do that? So a fantastic tool. I don't know if there's anyone, do you guys use adjustment layers much? I don't want to cover something everybody knows. Any adjustment layer fanatics out there?
No, teach us.
Okay. All right. So I didn't want to repeat too much. So in this layers palette, I'm going to pull it out so I can move it up here. You'll see at the bottom, there's a couple tools. We have the little plus sign that makes a new layer. We trash a layer, of course. Then there's these two little guys here. And these are adjustment layers and clipping masks. So we're going to go to that little sort of yin and yang circle here. And I'm going to click on that. And sure enough, you're going to see a lot of adjustments, brightness and contrast, exposure, vibrance, right? These are things that we can play with as an adjustment layer. You're also going to find those things up at the very top under image. You'll see adjustments. You'll see the same things. These you can absolutely adjust a layer this way, but it's destructive, which means that, 20 undos down the road, you can't really go back. And I'll sort of show you the difference there. So I'm going to actually flatten her down. So let's say we liked this overlay. I'm going to hold my shift key down, and we're going to make I can select two layers. I'm going to make a duplicate of those so we can play around a little bit. Let's say I want to flatten these layers together. I've decided this is what I like. I think I'm going to flatten her down. There's a couple ways you can do that. Command or Control E, and I like to think like it's like the E, and you're just flattening the layers. You can do it that way, or you can merge down, merge visible, which will turn those into one layer, right? So now we have one layer there. Oops, I just merged. No, it's okay. It'll be okay. So I wanted to show you the difference between adjusting this layer up here versus using an adjustment layer. If I'm ready to go and I'm like, I need to warm this up, I don't care if I have to change it later. I'm gonna make a copy of this, number one. But I'm gonna come up here. This is, all those adjustments are here. We can do brightness and contrast, right? Play around with that here. So all these layers are really here to finesse your work. I do that. I'm going to use to hue and saturation. Obviously, is going to change, you know, what she looks like in here. Saturation, lightness, that sort of thing. So we can make all those changes here. Let's make a copy of that too. So another one. But once I make a change up here, let's really change that hue and saturation. And let's go in and change the brightness and contrast, right? I'm actually, when you use the adjustments up here, you are physically changing the pixels on that layer. So you can't go back. That's what that layer is forever and ever. You've changed it. If you wanted to make a change and you don't want to commit yet, one way to do that is to use those adjustment layers on top. So I'm going to go back down to my other original. Here's our original lady here. And I'm going to come down and make an adjustment layer. It's this little circle with the little black and white tip, sort of half there. I'm going to click on that and I have options. These same options are down here. So let's go to brightness and contrast. Now, when I pop this up, you'll see we get a separate layer that says brightness and contrast. If I'm over here, this allows me to play with those same, you'll see a little window pops up. I can play with those same adjustments, but it hasn't changed the pixels underneath. It's like a separate layer, and I can get rid of that later on. I can come up here and change the opacity on that. And so it's a really great way to finesse things. Maybe you need to punch, even no matter what style you have, if you need to punch something up, right? It's feeling a little like maybe needs more contrast. You could, you know, drop a brightness and contrast adjustment layer on top of it, play around till it looks the way you want, and you're set, but you haven't actually changed the layer underneath yet. You can always go back. You can add multiple adjustment layers. So if we want to do brightness and contrast, and now I want to add, let's say, maybe it just needs to go a little more to the cool, right? So I'm going to go to color balance. Color balance is great because it's a little more fine-tuned than the hue and saturation is like a big broad stroke. But if I want to make this cooler, now I've got this color balance here. I can really go in and play. So you can see how quickly you can alter a piece or change a piece and experiment just with these adjustment layers alone, right? And the beauty of these is you can always change your mind later on. Now that being said, oftentimes I will go in and adjust a layer up here if I know it really does need to change or I want to adjust it and I'm done with it. But these adjustment layers can be really, really beneficial later on when you're working on a piece, right? We'll go back to like our little frog here. Let's see here if I can get him in there. If I wanted to throw an adjustment layer above this, like I decided the contrast was too much, I could come in and do brightness and contrast. There's my little brightness and contrast layer. If I wanted to lighten this image up, you got it all done. You're like, oh, I wish it had had more contrast. I can brighten it up, right? So I'm gonna click that. but I haven't actually affected the image underneath. So this can be really handy if you're going to turn something in, right, to an art director, and you want to, and they may want to say, hey, it feels a little dark, or might print too dark. You can always throw an adjustment layer on top and play with that without affecting your file underneath. So don't be afraid to play with these. There's a whole other level of detail that you can get to in these, playing with the masking, but I don't want to get too complicated on that. So does that make sense to everyone, how those layers work?
Yes.
Yes.
They can be a lifesaver because, you know, like let's say there's oh, it's too dark. It's just like printing and disappearing on the page. Like, okay, we can adjust that without actually changing your original piece. So let's see.
You've got another hour.
Good. I just want to make sure.
55 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah. So we did a little grisaille. And so in your piece here, if you want to try out that grisaille, I want to give you guys a few minutes to play with that. If you drop in, so back to our Froggio piece here, just keep Froggio on this little group here, and we're going to make a new layer. I'm going to call it grisaille or overlay. You can channel little old masters. And we're going to give it an overlay attribute. And just play with it a little bit. Play with some color in there. See what you can drop in on top. Let's see what my colors go. So see what you can do. Let me turn that out. You know, play a little bit with that layer and see, you know, how quickly we can drop in some layer and tone right over Froggio. If we decided, you know, does he want to be in color? I don't know. We can create it on that layer without even playing with his, you know, messing up what we have below. So go ahead and try that. Go ahead and create that overlay layer and see. Take a few minutes to sort of play around.
I have a question. I've been using Photoshop quite a while, but I don't use channels or paths. Is that something that's really not used much for just routine Photoshop work?
Yeah, I think as painters, we don't use those as often. Let me go back to our compositional, let's see where she portrait demo. Where that would come in handy, like on channels, what that is, the channels are basically set up as, you know, the RGB, which is, you know, or CMYK, depending on how you're working. You can adjust things here. You can play with the adjustments on those layers a little bit. You can see, you could actually paint into a single layer. Like if you just wanted to paint into the red layer, you can paint in that layer and it just affects anything that would be in that RGB sort of attribute, but I don't often use those too much. Paths are interesting. You can create selections that you save in paths and reload them, but I find it's easier to actually just create a selection. Let's go back to RGB. So if we wanted to create a selection, we wanted to reload, rather than using paths, I might come in and grab my selection tool. And let's say we want to create some hair in here. I'm gonna create a little hair shape. This is very fast and icky right now, but I'll give her some unusual hair. But let's say we created like a hair shape, or I don't know, maybe she's wearing something, but we want to save that selection to reload later. I would use this pathway rather than the paths. You can do a save selection under select and reload that at any time. So let's call it hair. So what we did is we created a selection, we went up to select, and we saved that selection. Okay. So the advantage of that is we could, let's grab our brush. Sorry. Here, I'm gonna grab my brush and I'm gonna put a color so we can sort of see what's happening in there. And we want to fill that selection in here. We could also fill it with the paintbrush, paint it in. And then later on, we're painting away and we want to come back to this area, we could reload that selection at any time. So I can come in and load that selection, right?
Okay.
And then there's, oh, I got a couple of hairs in there. I could load one of my other hairs there. So you can also save selections. I think that sort of works easier than the paths. But channels, basically that allows you to work in those separate channels if you wanted to paint in the red of the RGB or something.
Okay, very fine tuning.
Yeah, that might be more like, I don't know, maybe super editing or something.
Yeah.
Probably more people that are doing like photo editing and that sort of thing may use that.
Yeah.
and
Okay.
stuff. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. You can see all my saved selections are in there too.
Thanks.
Yeah. All right. Did everyone have a chance to sort of play a little bit with that overlay layer in Frogio? Fully? It's just another way to work that you don't have to damage what you have underneath. And it doesn't have to be on top of a black and white. We can even do that on top of something like this. Let's get her out of the way. If I wanted to put an overlay layer here, even over the top of color, another color layer, it allows us to sort of play a little bit, just on top and experiment, right? So I'm not really affecting this piece underneath. So it can be over a color version too. So overlay layers, some ways to play without damaging your piece. Those wonderful adjustment layers here that allow us to play with and change. You can also adjust at the top under image. When we're in, let me grab a layer here. We can also come in here and adjust anything here as well. So I wanted to sort of show you guys a little bit about filter galleries, and they're just kind of fun to play with. More of effects than anything else. I'm just gonna make a copy of her up there so we can see what's gonna happen. I don't know if anyone's played with filter galleries much. There's a lot of different filters and stuff you can apply, and you can kind of use those to paint. You can use those to create line work. And those are under filter at the top of your screen. So you'll see there's a lot of different things we can add noise to things, or pixelate or render. We could sharpen things or stylize. There's an oil painting thing, although some of these I feel like are kind of maybe overused, like the style, if you're just going straight in, you just want it to look like oil paint. I don't know, it kind of gives it that like almost like bad canvas, printout from like, you can kind of style it a little bit, but I don't know, I think it's a little bit too robotic looking for me, but that is there for you guys to play with as well. You can sort of see that sort of immediately creates like this effect. And once you start seeing these effects, you start noticing them like on ads and stuff too. But instead of playing with that, you can also, under there is called Filter Gallery. And this allows you to have a lot of fun options to play with. So I'm going to do two things here. I'm going to make a copy of her and show you how I might use a Filter Gallery effect. So I got her base here. I made a copy. And I'm going to go up to Filter and Filter Gallery. And when you come to this point, you're going to get a lot of funky little options happening. And we can't see her yet because she may not be in the screen. So down to the bottom left corner, we have a little zoom in and out. So I can zoom out so I can sort of see her, what's happening there. I'm going to zoom in so we can kind of see what effects are happening. And these are just different effects that you can play with in this filter gallery. There's a variety, like if we choose fresco, it's going to give you a little preview of how you can create effects. You can change adjustments in here on these effects, and it will give you like a little preview as it comes through. You'll see that little blue bar working. But we can try, you can try a lot of different things. There's a lot of different fun little adjustments to play with and filters. It takes a second for it to run through. but lots of great plastic wrap will do. That's kind of funky. And they may look a little heavy duty, like, would I use this? I don't know. But let's say we want to add one of these in there. And down here we have sketch, which is going to turn it into a black and white piece, which is kind of interesting if you had like a color study or something and brought it in and you wanted to create. So all you have to do is click once and it's going to create, sort of give you a preview of what that might be. Sometimes these might be a great way to start a painting. Let's go back up to watercolor. But all of these have adjustments over here as well. Sorry, I gotta wait for it to catch up to me. And again, it hasn't done anything until you've told it to. So I can come in and play with shadow density. It hasn't done anything yet.
You can also combine them,
Yeah,
which makes some really fun things.
Yeah, that was next. So we're gonna do, here, let's do a
Didn't mean
little.
to jump.
Oh, no, I love it. Because this should be about sharing, you know. Now, let's see if we can get her in, and we'll just take a minute for the little blue to catch up. Okay, that's kind of funky. Let's use that. That's a kind of cool texture that we've created. Now it seems like a little much, but now we can use that layer, like this was talking, as a top layer to maybe play with a few things. We can change its opacity, right, on there, depending on how much or little we want to show. And like I said, we can now play with some of these effects. Like, wow, it's kind of scary. So we can actually come in and really change a piece with that filter gallery and using these on top. You can use those as your base. Down in this area, I don't use it too often, but you could get some really interesting effects. But even if we just wanted to bring that in, like as a screen layer, right? We could come over here. Remember our adjustments. We could come over here and permanently adjust this layer. Let's bring the saturation down. And maybe adjust a little bit of the brightness and contrast. So we've changed this layer irrevocably up here, but you can sort of see how you can use a layer. You can use the filter galleries, you can use textures, you can change the attributes. I can come in here and drop this down a little if we just want to have a little bit of that happening. But you can really change a piece pretty quickly in Photoshop just with a layer, with a filter, with those adjustment layers on top. So don't be afraid to play around in here. You can always duplicate a layer and come back to it as well. So some of you guys were asking about text too. I want to make sure we get that in. One easy way, let's come back to Frogio here. Text is a really easy thing to add in Photoshop. Especially if you're doing a book dummy or something and you maybe wanted to add in some text. And you can add that really simply over here in your toolbar again. There's that little T. And if it's not, well, there should be some sort of T. You just want to make sure it's the regular horizontal type tool. You choose that and you just click anywhere for now where your type is going to be. And you'll see this little lorem ipsum type come up. And I'm just going to double click just like you would in a Word doc. And I can come in and change it to, I'm a terrible typist. We're out there. I don't know how to do the Shakespearean thing, but we're out now. All right. Now it's a little small. Oopsie, I forgot though. If we select that while we have the type tool, we can come up here and change a lot of things. We can change the color. By clicking in here, we can change the size here. We can change the typeface right over here. Let's go with maybe, let's see what we have in here, Baskerville. And we can make it bold or semi-bold, bold italic. So you have a lot of options to play with here. So, and once that looks good, we're going to go ahead and click in here. Our type tool, we are done. And you notice this has come in as a type layer. You'll see that little T there. Right now, it doesn't see it as pixels. It's an object. So we can move it around. We can resize it. At the very top of your toolbar is that move tool, the little crossed arrows. That allows us to move this type where we want it. So if I want it down here, I can drop it in there. If I need to resize that type, Command T or Control T, or under Edit, Transform, I can, enlarge or shrink that type. And so far, I haven't changed this layer. It's still a type layer, and I can go back in and edit it. So you guys notice I accidentally typed Froggy without an O. So
Can
when I
you
press,
warp it, like if you want it on a curvy line?
you can. So once we warp it, though, you can bring type in on a curve. I'm trying to remember how to do that exactly. You can change it. So,
But I think then you have to transform it to
yeah,
pixels.
yeah, it will transform. So if you wanted to just warp and change this, you could. Let's see. I'm going to make a copy of this. Let me get my face out of the way there. So you can warp and change this, but yeah, as soon as you begin to transform it, it's going to turn into a pixelated piece. Matter of fact, it won't let me do that. So I'm going to have to change it into convert to, let's see. Can I do that? I'm going to have to merge them down so it can become digital. So once it's a pixel layer, I can do that. It looks like. And then I can pull and play with that type. But you can't actually warp and change a type layer itself, but you can, once it's pixelated, you can really play with it.
On the top next to the color, there's like a T over a U. Does that change the angle of the words?
Over here?
Yeah, at the top when you've accepted that transformation there.
Oh, yeah. Let me go ahead and accept that. Yeah, so in our type here, there is the warp text here, and that's going to warp it a bit. So we can arc it a little. So one way to do it is a digital file. I'm going to hit cancel so I can turn this one off. So yeah, if you hit that little T, the circle there, yeah, that's kind of cool. So arc, bulge, shower lel, flag, wave, we can kind of wave it, and then it looks like we've got some options to change how that's going to happen. And let's see if that keeps it in its type. Oh, it does. It keeps it in its type format, so you wouldn't have to pixelate it. Nice. I didn't know you could do that. So that's that little T with the hill there. So let's sort of change and play. And even though this is a type layer, we can still play with these options here. If you wanted to reverse that out, you could come down to divide or play around with some of these options as well. Yeah, so those are still an option too for those type layers. Probably want to pull them to the top. So we want it to be like a light layer. You could just bring it down into like linear light or fade back into the background. You can just kind of endless what you can do in Photoshop. That's kind of nice because it gives it like a little see-through effect. So yeah, it's an easy way to add type. So the type tool is down here. Oops, I just added another layer. Here, we don't need that one. Of type. Were there any other questions that you guys wanted me to go over before I jump into anything else? I mean, there's just so much to look at. All right.
I do have a question about when you bring in Procreate files and it gives you the option for a PSD. Does the quality go down, or is there anything with that, like a difference in Photoshop quality?
Yeah, there shouldn't be any difference. It'll come in at the same size and pixels that your Procreate file was in. So if you save a Procreate file at like 300 pixels per inch at 8.5 by 11, it'll come into Photoshop the same way, 300 pixels per inch, 8.5 by 11, and it should maintain most of its layers and that sort of thing as well. So the only thing that happens is when you go from Photoshop to Procreate, there's some things that Photoshop can do that Procreate can't. So like maybe these layer attributes, like when we were doing brightness and contrast layers, things like that might not translate the same way into Procreate, but you should be able to open your Procreate files pretty easily into there. So make sure. So I was going to kind of show you guys some layout ideas that I pass on to my students, like for landscapes and world building, that are kind of fun to play with. And is there anyone that uses architecture a lot in their work that does gridding or perspective grids or anything? It's kind of specific, so I didn't want to throw it in there if no one needed it.
It was texted yes, and I don't like to draw buildings, so this would be useful.
Yeah, okay, good. So let's open up, well, let's do this. Let's go to, not portrait, yeah. So I was going to talk a little bit about starting files, and we'll talk about that perspective grid that can really help. One way that I'll start a file sometimes, and I just have sort of a quick example up here, is if I have a reference or something, and maybe I'm leaning on to create like an area, and I just want to create a quick reference, I'll just do like a quick rough sketch on a piece, maybe on one layer, to create that, world that I'm doing, just to do an exploratory sketch. And that, don't forget, you can just create those underpaintings if you want them. They can always go away later on. But another way to play with that is to actually create some layering, and we'll talk about the perspective grid. Let's see here. So I have here like some line work I've brought in here. And I have my line work on multiply so I can see through it. So sort of I can paint underneath. I'm starting on sort of a medium ground because for my stuff, I like to start sort of on a medium ground so I don't have that white page. But and so I'm going to lock this layer up, my little line layer, because I want to be able to paint underneath there. And I'm going to make a new layer, and let's block in that building. So I'm just going to come over and grab my mixing brush tool, and we're going to come down and, oops, come here, you, sorry. All right, you. Sorry, my computer's acting a little wonky. There it goes. Let's just sort of rough in this building here. I'm going to get a color here. So I'm just going to rough in this building, little houses, right? Make sure I'm on the right layer. I could rough it in this way. So we'll get that building in here. And I may want to make sure that my perspective's working and I've got all my lines, happening here. I'm going to add a little area up here that maybe comes up a little higher just for this demo. So there's a kind of a fun way to create this grid. If you need a quick perspective grid, there's sorry, I can't talk today. There's perspective grids that you can drop into Photoshop pretty easily. There's a way to sort of create one right from your horizon line if you want to play around with it. And that's using this polygon tool over here. So I'm going to come down to the polygon tool. And it might show up as a rectangle or you have to pop up. There's a circle and a square here. I'm going to come into this polygon tool. I'm going to keep that shape. I'm going to keep the stroke fairly small. I'm gonna do a fill of, let's see, since we have a red building, I'm gonna go to green. Keep it kind of small. And then I'm gonna come over here and I want to have at least 100 in this section here. And then I'm gonna come down here and do a star indent. Let's see, let's look. And from center. So I can kind of, oops. Sorry, beat me to the punch there. I can kind of pull out a perspective grid this way. Let's see. Oh, one sec. Sorry, my other windows are popping up. From center. Okay. So now I'm going to zoom out a little bit. And if I decide my horizon line is back here and I want to pull out some perspective lines, I'm just going to click and drag right where I want that perspective line to come from. So I'm creating this polygon tool. And I'm going to hit return. And you can sort of see those perspective lines on there. This box keeps popping. It's on its own layer. So I can, keep that layer at the top. And I start to see some lines coming out from that perspective. And already I can see where my building is off, right? Because, this was just the sketch I brought in. So you can already see like where some of this building really needs to be adjusted to really feel like it's sitting in that space. Where I pulled out those polygon lines. So now I can come back down here and start adjusting. So I'm going to grab my painting tool here and let's do maybe some back sides of this. So now I can see like, wow, this is totally not working for what my perspective wants to be in this case. So I can come in and use that constrain tool to maybe readjust that building so that it's on the right perspective. For this space. I'm going to know that this line's going to need to come over here. It just gives me some perspective lines to start to play with, and I can kind of finesse this building along those perspective lines there. I can see that this one's coming down here. This line actually needs to be up here disappearing. So it's a really quick way to kind of create a really easy perspective tool for yourself with that polygon tool. So I can make some quick corrections on this building so it feels like it's going back into the correct, correct direction in space. So the way I did that was with the polygon tool. So let's toggle that on and off. Now I have a perspective tool that I can use no matter what I'm adding to this piece, right? So let's go to that polygon. So the way I created that and dragged it out, I'm just going to turn that off. Was polygon tool down here. Click on that polygon tool. Then you have these shapes up here. You can choose, I'm sorry, the stroke color is what we should have chosen, the green. You're going to come over here. I chose 100 just so I have enough lines as it pulls out. And under this setting, under the gear setting, you just keep it on symmetric and from center. And the reason I'm going to zoom out is I need to pull it, like kind of rubber band it out again. So I'm going to click and drag, right? This might be a little different because I'm choosing a different perspective spot. And I hit return. And I have those perspective lines on there. I might lock that layer up too, so I have something underneath. But sometimes the perspective for Photoshop has perspective grids and things you can load, but they don't always line up with maybe your drawing and what you're working with. So that's a nice way to kind of create your own little quick perspective grid. Well.
Laura Susan, Danielle's asking, have you ever used the vanishing point effect? She said it uses her.
Yeah, you can use those as well. In Photoshop, I haven't used those a lot, but I'm trying to remember where those are. Is it under edit? I haven't used those too much, so I can't speak too much to it. But yeah, there's different perspectives and stuff that you can use to load in. I think of where those would be. Perhaps. Yeah, I'm not sure where those are. Do you know where those are for the perspectives? Do you use those a lot?
I don't use them a lot. I'm trying to figure them out. There it is. It's under filter.
Yeah.
It's like in that top set that says vanishing point at the bottom there.
Ah, there we go.
And I'm always confused by it, and I'd love to know how to use it. But if you
Yeah.
don't use it very often, maybe you also don't find it useful.
Well, oh, we might. Oh, well, you just okay. That's pretty easy. Let's see if we do that.
Like it says something about tearing off and clicking things, and that's where I get lost.
Yeah, let's see. Yeah, I would have to look into this one a little bit more, but yeah,
No problem. I just wanted to know,
Yeah.
like, does anybody use this? Is everybody find it as confusing as I do?
yeah. Sometimes there's things in here that are a little harder to do. I know like people use timeline for animation, and that makes me insane, timeline in here.
Oh, I wouldn't do that here, but thank you very much.
Yeah. So
Well, and also in children's books, the perspective is not always perfect, and quite
No.
often it's not perfect. So
no.
just don't get tied down to having things right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Charming is more important.
Exactly. And the stylistic, how it's going to come out. So left 3. Okay, so we have 20 minutes left. Just want to make sure I can fit everything that I wanted to talk about. We talked a little bit about making hair and textures in Photoshop. I mean, in Procreate. I wanted to talk a little bit about textures in here and how quickly you can utilize textures. Let me go back to our portrait here. Let me see here. Let me open her. So one of the things that you can bring in to on top of your work is textures outside of your chosen area. So let me turn that off. And let's just come up to, let's make a new file here. Oh, where my layers go? There he is. I'm just gonna make a new file, and I'm just gonna go color and pull it out over here. One of the quick things we can do is bring texture in and utilize that as a tool as well. And I'm gonna go ahead and open a file up and show you guys. I don't know if anyone uses the cloning and the rubber stamp tool. It's kind of like a little unsung hero too. Let me see here. I wanted to open up. There he is. All right, slowly opening. So a lot of times you can paint, with texture as well. And I don't know if anyone uses the cloning or the rubber stamp tool much, but it can be a great little tool for a lot of different things.
Like wallpaper.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Wallpaper, or maybe you have a flower garden and you want to add more flowers, and just repeat a cute pattern. Yeah, it can be such a great tool. And you can use that on a different layer as well. So let me get this guy to open here. And it has the same tools, attributes that the brushes have. We can play with opacity, and you can play with fill and that sort of thing too. So I'm just going to take this little guy here. And we're just going to blow him up a little and just add a little bit of texture to his body. So you can see here, I have a little bit of texture already in there. And I'm just taking some fish scales I found online, like on a photograph for an advertisement. And I'm just using that as texture only. So I'm not using it straightforward, but you can see how just adding a little texture on top can make a big difference. This is with soft light, so we can see through to the light, underneath. So let me just show you how that works, if anyone's used this tool very much. It just allows you to paint with a texture. So let's find its, there's our scales. So this is the layer with our scales on it. And if we want to add a little bit of on top of this guy, we can do is create a new layer. And the reason I want to do a new layer, I want to show you the couple settings on that rubber stamp tool. I'm going to make it a little smaller. I'm just going to use the soft round here. And we're going to paint some scales on this guy here. So the way this works is, if you haven't used it before, the brush itself, you need to use the, let's see, option, Lizzie, what's the option key in the PC?
Alt.
Alt, okay. So you're going to use the Alt key, and you notice when I press down on the Alt key, I get this tool changes and I get a little bullseye. And so that bullseye is going to be where we want to start picking up texture. So I'm on this layer, I'm going to pick up the texture here, and then I can repaint anywhere. So now it's like it's connected with a metal rod, and you're going to recreate, you can repaint that texture somewhere else. And that's full opacity, full flow, right? So I'm going to jump up to the layer above. You can sample beneath your layers as well. You'll see up here on the toolbar, we have that opacity, we have that flow, we've got current layer, but we can also sample current layer and below, or all layers. So I'm just going to say current and below, so I can sample from those scales and paint on a new layer. So I'm going to come over here again with that option key and click on those scales. Click once or tap. I'm going to bump down the opacity a little bit, as I maybe don't want it that brilliant on there. So, and I'm still working on this layer, even though I reached through to that other layer. Now, you'll see it's a little less opaque, but you notice as I came over here, I get a sharp line. You've reached the limit of that texture that you're drawing from. So what you may need to do is option, click. I'm going to come over and paint a little bit of that texture here. And I might have to go resample again so I don't end up over on that edge. So I can drop in that texture. So you may have to resample and keep coming back over to your texture itself. Now remember, I can play with the opacity and flow. So if I want that texture to drop off a little, I only want it to maybe shine in that part of the fish. I'm going to option key and click. I've bumped down the opacity. So I'm doing a little less opaque painting here. So yeah, it can be great, like Lizzie was saying, wallpaper, patterning, or just a textural background. And now we have this fish here with his texture, but we may want to be able to see through there. So once you've laid texture down on a layer, you can still come back and play with these different attributes for that layer, right? And get different effects as well, right? Let's just go ahead and screen that there. We can play with adjustments up here. You know, if we want to drop back on the saturation and drop that in. So now we have a little bit of texture on this fish. It's pretty straightforward. But yeah, like a wall pattern, wallpaper, it can be a really great tool as well. Or if we wanted to paint some more of these plants, right? We can come back up here and go to current and all layers. So as soon as we choose all layers, we can grab any of this and paint. So I can grab a little bit of that kelp here and there we go. Oh, it's on a very low opacity. So bump that up a little bit. I could add a little kelp in here, right? So I'm going option click. And make sure that's not showing up there for us. I can add in those areas as well. So that can be a really great tool to paint with, to utilize. So that's the clone tool, or sometimes they call it the stamp tool. Let's see. Do you have any questions on any of the tools I've gone over? I know we sort of went over a lot of stuff in here today.
I don't know if this is too elementary, but layers confuse me, and I was wondering if other people have that problem, or do I just need to do some reading and figure it out?
What, let's see, what, is it, setting up the layers or working on the layers? What sort of?
Just sort of, I usually just use one layer and then 2 or 3 above it, and that's it. So I'm not really that sophisticated about that. And I don't know if that's, if it's just my problem. I don't want to, you know, bore everybody else with it.
No. Well, and that's an aesthetic thing, and it's how people work. Everyone's going to work a little differently. I've known people that just work on one layer like that, and paint. There's no reason why you can't. I think a lot of times people will utilize multiple layers if they want to maybe create their character art on one layer. I might create, let's see, where's my little guy here? Like on this layer, I wanted to create these reeds and things on a separate layer, you know, so I could maybe paint behind them later on. So some people paint with a lot of different layers going on. Some people are happier just painting on a single layer. I think it's more of just a preference type of thing.
In my case, it's by laziness.
Oh, no. I've known a lot of people that paint on one layer, or they'll paint, you know, let's say they'll paint the entire frog piece on one layer. And if you want to do something more to it, so I would say, like, if you're painting on one layer and now you're ready to do something kind of destructive or adventurous, maybe make a copy of that layer and you can work on that. You can always come back, right?
Okay, I've learned a lot, so I'll review this whole lesson and learn a lot from you. Thank you.
Yeah.
One of the most important things about layers is to name them immediately.
Yes.
And the way you do that is you double click on whatever layers thing, and then just retype.
Yeah.
Okay. That way, you know, you can find where you did that little scribble that you want to get rid of.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're like, yeah, where are the eyeballs? I don't know. You know, like I know where the glow pants are. They're right here, and color glow. And yeah, if you do work with a lot of layers, it can get kind of crazy. And then the other thing I didn't really show, I think that was Procreate. I'm trying to remember what I did in Procreate, what I haven't done in here. Let me turn off all of these guys. Boop.
Another handy thing to know is that if you have a text layer, you can double click right on the picture of the T and it will highlight all the text in that layer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's turn our layer back on. Let's see. Oh, in the layer. Yeah. Over here.
Yeah. So not on the picture.
There we go. Ooh, that's something I didn't know. That's pretty cool. Yeah, I know you can come back in with the text tool too to do that, but I didn't do that.
Yeah, and it'll automatically bring up the text tool.
Yeah.
The hard thing is, like, when you are in text and then you do Control Z, it actually types a Z.
Yeah.
So you have to go to some other tool, but when you're done with your text.
Yeah. And on layers, if you do end up working with a lot of layers, like this was, you know, different little sections. And I think I did this in Procreate. I don't think I did it in here. I'm just gonna make a couple layers here. So I made some new layers. And let's say you're looking and you're like, you know, all of these layers here are the frog body, for instance. And I want to put those and not have to look at 70 layers or 35 layers. I can multiple select with my shift key. I'm going to hold the shift key down and go down to layer 26. Because you don't always want to flatten. You might want to keep it in layers. And I can actually come up to that little sandwich lines again and make a group from my layers.
Or do Command G.
Yeah. And so like we'll do like frog, even though there's nothing in there. And now I've sort of tucked them away. So like there's a lot of layers in this file, but I don't want to have to look at all of them at once. You know, it's kind of better way to organize. Like if you have all your frog layers in here, they're not flattened down. You know, you can still go in and play with them and use them, but you can toggle them out of the way when you're not, you know, wanting to play in there as well. So
okay, thanks.
There's a lot of artists that only use one layer, you know, that they just go like traditional paint and, you know, go for it.
Yeah, but it's hard to correct things.
Yeah. So what I would do is before you do anything big, like you're like, you know what, I'm going to adjust the lighting on this piece. Take that layer. Let's see. Let's go into. Let me see what's open. So let's say, you know, this was your piece. This is all done in one layer. This one here. So let's say I'm like, I really like this, but now I want to start pushing the shadow, right? Just drag that down or do a Command J and make a copy of it before you do something really big, because you can always go backwards. That's one way to sort of keep
That
it.
is the
one
one
in your
thing
pocket.
you should remember from this whole
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
I tell my students, keep one in your pocket in case you go,
Yeah.
I don't like this. You can go backwards,
You can also
Yeah.
duplicate groups, like say you want to make another frog.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can make
Okay.
you just Command J or drag it down to that little thing there.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, because there's nothing worse than going, oh, I wish I hadn't done that. So but that's the beauty of digital.
Yeah,
Is
might as well
you
just
can
use
go,
traditional art. if you can do that.
yeah.
Yeah,
There's
okay.
one tool you can go to in a Hail Mary if you surpassed your undos. And there's a window called History here.
Mhm.
And that will show you everything you've done.
Oh, yes.
And you can undo some of those. You can go backwards and go back to them. That's a little more high
You
end.
can also, on the left of that, in the history thing, you can make a mark, like a place that you might want to pop back to if you're trying a bunch of different things.
Yeah, like I go, oh, that layer visibility. Let's check that again, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
So
so
this is
that's
sort
a
of
good
the
way to
Hail
hop
Mary.
back a bunch of hop back a bunch of do's.
Yeah. Yeah, because you only get so many. You can set more, but yeah, you can only get so many. So
Okay, thanks.
just looking, is there anything else, like anybody layer, masks or changing clipping paths, any of that stuff you want me to do again before we head out, or for questions? So the one thing I would say is sort of that PSA we had for Procreate. We didn't talk about was starting a new file. For those of you that are beginners here, when you start in Photoshop, you're going to get your open new, right? You're opening a new file. One thing you want to make sure of, and I didn't go over this in the beginning, was over here that your pixels per inch are at least 300. And you can check up here the size, make sure you're working two sides, because since what you guys are all going to be doing is going to print on the printed page, you want to make sure it's all correct. And it's in pixels now, but you can just click here and go to inches and make sure if your art director said 15 by 13.6, or if they said 15 by 10, change that so it's what you need to work to. And then sometimes you want to work with a bleed, right, when you're going to print. So if it's a 15 by 10 page, you're going to need a little bleed in there too. So I might set the page in there. And if I want to make room for a bleed, I might pull down Command R or Control R will give you your rulers.
Oh, right.
And I'm going to pull down a little ruler guide. So I went into that ruler and I was able to pull down a guide. And I'm going to pull out a guide. Just come here,
You just click and drag from the numbers.
Yeah. And you can give yourself a little bit of bleed by then getting the crop tool and just coming out a little bit. And I like that they do this now because they let you expand your palette this way without having to go into image. You can just give yourself a little room so you know where your bleed is, right, when you're painting. Because sometimes you might need that little bleed, coming off the page. So you can do a couple of things. You can use those guidelines to sort of help you know, I need to paint a little past the edge there, so it prints off. You don't get that little weird white space for print. I'm trying to think of any other things that might work for printing. The nice thing with this too is if this was your page, you can also pull those guides out. So like halfway would be 7.5. Here's where your gutter is. So remembering, like, for picture books, you could kind of set up, preset where your gutter is. These are just guides that you can make go away, but it kind of helps you remember when you're painting or laying something out that there is that gutter there. And you can get rid of your guides a few ways. You can come down to, where's hide guides? Where are you? Oh, show guides. You can hide those guides as well, and then just pop them right back in again if you need them. Show guides. So those are really important little tools for print. I think that's good to know because it keeps you kind of thinking about the gutter area and that sort of thing while you're working.
I have a question about formats. If you're sending a file to be printed, these days, do they prefer a PNG or a TIFF file, or what format do most people prefer?
TIFF is more accurate in color, but it's also the biggest. JPEG will change your colors. A PNG is a small file, but it does show invisibility, which JPEGs do not. So that they would probably, I would do a TIFF personally, but they're huge.
Okay. Okay.
But I'm sure when you're working digital, your files get pretty big anyway. So there's probably going to be some sort of like,
Transfer thing.
box or transfer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Oh, and then the last thing for print I wanted to bring up, which I always try to bring up, which I almost forgot, is our colors. One nifty thing that Photoshop does that Procreate does not do, so you have to be careful in Procreate, is when you're choosing your colors, I can come in here and choose some tones. Wish I could make this a little bigger, but if you look right up here underneath these colors, you're going to see as I move up, see if I can find a zinginess. Come here, you. Oh, there we go. See how that little exclamation point popped up here? That's a warning to you that, okay, you're using some colors that may be difficult to print. They might be out of the CMYK scale. So just watch that. If you're using a lot of stuff and that you're finding this pop up, it might mean that they just have to make another run, or although we were just talking like printing is so more advanced now that you can almost recreate all those colors. But it might add to what you have to do to get your final piece to look like what you want in print for that too. So just watch those colors, your color choices and things too.
So you're working in RGB. Is that damaging when you transfer it to CMYK or?
Yes.
Yeah. So yes, you can change when you open your file.
Yeah, that's important.
Yeah, it's right here with color mode. You can change that right here. So you can go to CMYK.
Okay.
And that way you're working in the right output. It's going to be closer to what you're going to see on the printed page.
Does it matter if it's 8 or 16-bit?
And when you go to 16-bit in Photoshop, there's some filters and things that you can't use. So if you're ever getting stuck and something's not working or filters aren't aligned, you check and make sure you can change that too in your file. So, and you can also change the background color that you come in on your base file. So if you wanted to come in with a darker tone, you can set
Or
that
with no
there.
background color.
Yeah,
The little
nothing.
checkerboard thing.
Yeah.
So
So be a little crazy.
It
So
is
you
hard to look at, but it's
transparent. Yeah, that's the lead time. It's transparent will come in like this.
yeah.
And
But if you're going to end up doing something that needs like if you're going to take it into After Effects or something,
yes,
then you won't want that.
yeah,
You won't want a background.
yeah, because you don't want to have white, like a block of white back there. So
Okay, what about calibrating your monitor for color correction? Because it seems like when I see something on screen, it looks great, and then I print it off and the blues are way off, but it's a new printer.
Is a whole another thing.
yeah.
But you can do that if you're working with a publisher, they can tell you what the settings are. I've never done that. I just send them the original, let them scan it. But
I've never had them suggest that they would do. Actually, what I do is I give them the original images. I print them out to my satisfaction, or I chain it in traditional or whatever, and give them the actual images instead of trying to digitize them because I'm so worried about the color.
Well, yeah, that's a good way to do it. Just to print out something that looks the way you want it to and send it as an example, and then they can calibrate it to match.
Good idea.
So you're actually talking about like something you've scanned in or bring into Photoshop, and then you're sending it that way?
Yeah, sometimes, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Or creating it in Photoshop, and worrying about it translating well.
Yeah. Printers are pretty good these days. They can really match the output print. And you'll get to approve. You could usually get to approve your first run and stuff too. So
usually,
usually, but yeah, you can. I mean, if you have a monitor, Macs are pretty good, but of course, everything we look at on here on these screens has light coming towards us, so that color has a different
It
feel.
always looks really pretty, and
Yeah,
then your
but it's
printer,
more
who
just-
knows, you know?
Yeah, so you never know,
Yeah,
but
it
yeah.
glows.
Yeah, and then you're like, oh, and that's something you have to be careful with when you're doing a lot of dark. If you're for some reason illustrating a lot of dark scenes and things, they can come out really like oversaturated. When I say oversaturated in the darkness value, you know, when they print, some colors can get lost. But yeah.
Well, our time is up. That was fantastic. I can tell that people could go on, except their brains would probably explode. But you will get a PDF afterwards, and we'll send the link as soon as we have it up. You'll have a month to look at it. And thank you so much. That was fantastic.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Never sure what to put out there because there's so much stuff to put out there. And I just say, just play, push buttons and play with the filter galleries and really play with the layers and you know, those different attributes and your brushes and how you use them. And yeah, just think about all that, just play with it. So.
This is great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Good night.
Have fun with it.
Yay.
Very good. Excellent. I learned a lot.
After doing Procreate, I was sort of like, did I do that in Procreate and Photoshop, or did I both?
I think you did. Yeah.
Yeah,
You did great. I saw both. You did great.
Thanks. Great. Well, everybody can play a little this weekend then.
Yeah,
Very
do
good.
play before it falls out of your head.
Yeah, it's that muscle memory. Right?
Yes, for sure. Thanks. Be well.
Yeah,
All
thank
right.
you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Yeah,
Thanks
bye-bye.
again.
So,
All right, Laura, we're just going to stay on for a little bit to do a little debrief.
Okay. And I will. Thanks for having me, guys. And then.
I have one question.
Oh, sure.
So I currently have, like you can see, an iPad, and I use AstroPad to it's just an app that can translate from your iPad to my computer. It's fine, but I just have this one screen and it's so small, and I'm just I need another solution now that I'm making more content and I just don't know what application to use. Should I get a Wacom Intuos one, or should I get a monitor, or I just don't know.
So you're doing everything on your iPad right now, or do you have a laptop as well?
Yeah, so I have right now I'm talking to you on my MacBook Pro, and then I use AstroPad app to have it on my computer and my iPad.
Oh,
So
got
it I can work on here and draw. So it's like a Wacom sort of.
Oh, right.
Or
There's a sidecar option too. And if it's a Mac laptop and an iPad,
Yeah.
you go into your selections under the Apple, go to System Preferences. There is a thing called Sidecar. And if you hit Sidecar, it turns your iPad into a little Cintiq. So you can actually work in Photoshop from your laptop on your iPad as a Cintiq. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So how do I do that?
Here, let me do a quick
to-
screen share if I can share that. Let's see. Okay, there we go. System Preferences. So when you're in System Preferences, it's under the Apple. You go to System Preferences. Down here it says if you're on Wi-Fi, if you're Wi-Fi for your computer and your iPad, you can click Sidecar. Mine's not on, so I have to open my iPad up. But as soon as my iPad's up, I can select my iPad and my iPad becomes a Cintiq. So I can work in Photoshop on my laptop and
Right.
use my iPad as a Cintiq, basically.
That's what I'm doing currently, but just with this app.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering if because sometimes there is a lag even with even when I'm not on Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
And I use like a direct plugin.
So a Wacom or a Cintiq would be a great option. Lizzie, do you use a Cintiq for your stuff? Did you get a Cintiq?
We had an old Cintiq plugged into a computer that died. So
we have Cintiqs at the college. You can get them in different sizes, which is nice. Like up to we just got some new 22-inch or 22-inch, which is really nice size. Although they get kind of pricey.
Right.
So
yeah,
that's
you can
one
get the
option.
8.5 by 11 one, and I think it's 1,000 or 1,200 or
Yeah.
it's not big, but it's a Cintiq.
Yeah. Or you can do a Wacom, which is a little less money, which I'm working on the Wacom, but I still have my Wacom because I have a Dell monitor that's made for art usage. So it's a big monitor that's calibrated so I can see what I'm working on big.
Cool.
But yeah. And there's some other brands like Huon is like another brand that we're seeing a lot of students using, and it seems to be pretty good. It doesn't have any lag time, and they're a little less expensive than the Cintiqs. So they have a lot of the same capabilities and stuff too.
Cool. Thank you so much. I'll let you
You're
guys.
welcome.
Bye.